Is this different than, hi, first of all, hello? Is this
hi.
different than
Yes,
what we,
there's
okay.
been some changes today.
Okay. Make sure your mic's
Are you gonna turn the camera on so I have to look at myself on the
I
screen?
didn't set that up, so I can turn it
No,
on.
we don't
I
need
know
to.
if it's set up.
Well, you're under, right? What's third? That's fire department.
Okay,
Are we live?
you're live.
Perfect. Alrighty, let's get this meeting started. It's 6:31 here on the 14th of January 2025. We have a quorum. Joe Tom is excused this evening. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty. Do we have any amendments to the agenda? The only thing I wanted to note is that we're getting a presentation from town legal counsel tonight, and so when she arrives, we may pause budget discussions to hear from her, and then jump back into budget discussions to be respectful of her time. And so we'll just have to wait till she gets here. She has another conflicting meeting, and we kind of hopped on her schedule last minute. Okay, seeing no other amendments, do we have any public comment tonight? Yep. Just state your name. If we just steal maybe
There you go.
Chief's microphone.
Hi, Juliet Kaplinger, Royalsboro Road. So I understand we're going to be talking about contract zoning tonight, and I would like to offer a couple comments as a citizen, not as a planning board member, even though I am a planning board member. In relation to solar, I just want folks to, remember that we just passed the solar ordinance in this town. And there was a reason for that. We talked about siting, but the ordinance still passed without any sort of siting conditions. And so now we're proposing to put solar into contract zoning, which I'm not opposed to, but we voted to approve solar in our town, so I want to make sure everyone remembers that. And I would like to propose that perhaps a minimum threshold for solar being kicked into contract zoning is 10 acres, no less than 10 acres, is my recommendation. A 10-acre solar project, and that's your project size, is not a very large project. That would show the town and others that we are not prohibitive of solar, but we do care about where these projects are going. Larger than 10 acres, yes, let's go to contract zoning. And also one other thing is just to recall that in the solar ordinance, we do have, I would say, quite stringent setbacks and buffers. I think it's like 50 feet of veg, which is a very big buffer. So regardless of whether these go to contract zoning or not, these have buffers. So if there is a view issue, it's already in our ordinance. So again, I would like to propose 10 acres, no less, going to contract zoning.
Thank you, Juliet.
Yeah.
Do we have any other public comment before we get started this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move right here into discussion on we have to open a public hearing on general assistance maximums. So do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion from Josh. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
From Deb. All in favor of moving into the public hearing? All opposed? Seeing none. All right, where's my document here, Jerry, for general assistance? Yeah. So, could you give us a little explanation here?
Yeah, so the town of Durham follows the Department of Health and Human Services on their general assistance. So when they update their maximums, we have to update our maximums. It's kind of a formality because we follow their policy. So these are the maximums that you have before you, and they're maximums as far as like if someone needed help with a burial or a cremation or food maximums or something like that. We follow their guidelines, and then we get reimbursed a certain percentage depending on what they're actually asking for. So they've upped their maximums in 2025, and we need to, or the board needs to adopt these maximums to put it into our policy. So we're updated and compliant with the Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah. Thank you. And so, because it's a change in this, we open it up to a public hearing. If anyone wants to provide comments or feedback on what they think of adopting the maximums or changing the maximums that we're proposing, which is to follow the Department of Health and Human Services recommendation. So is there any comments from the public on adopting these general assistance maximums? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the general assistance maximum update as presented in our packet.
So,
So we have a motion from Josh. Do I have a second? Second from Heather. All right, so do we have any additional discussion here on the general assistance maximum update?
Jerry, is this like then an attachment to an existing policy that we have that we'll update and include
Yeah,
update
this
the
goes,
policy?
yeah, this will go in the maximum. Actually, did you put it in the consent agenda that what they have to sign?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good question, though.
And in general, how do we feel about the residents' knowledge of this? It's more than just asking for support in funerals or cremations, right? It's,
Yeah, it's all of
It's
what you see,
yeah.
food maximums, heating, fuel.
I'm just wondering if maybe it's time that we include something in the news blast that just says this exists. It would come at a good time as the rates were changed, because there's probably some people that need help that don't even know about this.
I
Just a
will,
thought.
I will say that most people that apply for general assistance don't qualify because because they typically make too much money for, I mean, you gotta be really struggling to even qualify. And the folks that have tried to get some general assistance they don't meet the bottom threshold.
Yeah,
to
I
get-
But
think
whether it
so.
comes from
I
the
think
select
they-
board or us, I think knowing that the criteria has been modified would be a good time to just reiterate that the program exists for the residents.
Okay.
Yep, we can definitely do some information
Yeah.
that, maybe in a news blast, just that the select board has increased the general assistant
Yeah.
maximums, and that if you have an inquiry,
See this policy.
to reach out,
Yeah.
so.
Maybe we could also say that the select board has increased maximums to align with,
Yeah.
so that residents
Mhm.
don't think that we just like pulled numbers out of the air.
Yeah,
Right.
perfect. Any other questions on the motion? So, all in favor of approving the motion?
In favor. Thank you.
Any opposition? Seeing none? We'll sign that.
And you wanna close the public hearing.
Yep, and do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
second.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor? Any opposition? Seeing none, we'll move along. Okay, next on our agenda is the Department of Transportation letter of support. So this is to vote to send a letter of support to the Department of Transportation for the all-way stop on Route 136 on Rabbit Run and Quaker Meeting House Road. Just a reminder, this is not an approval from the select board. The select board does not get the chance to approve or deny this intersection. It will happen with or without our approval. But based off of the data that we were provided by the DOT, we are supportive of it. Whether we were supportive of it or not, it's going in. And we just, they kind of meet with us as a courtesy. And so this will incur no additional cost from Durham taxpayers because it's a state road. And we just want to send that we support their action here to help increase the safety at that intersection. This intersection is rated one of the top intersections for fatality estimate in the state of Maine. And so it has risen to the level for the town there, or for the state there. And a perfect example is since the intersection at Quaker Meeting House Road and 125 went in, there's only been one accident in all the years that we've had that go in there. So We don't want to argue with facts and pull our opinions into it, so we're just following the recommendation from DOT with a support letter. So, do we have any other questions about this letter?
The only thing that I just noticed, and maybe it's fine, the way that the bottom reads is that you're the town manager in that last sentence. How it says, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, and then it says town manager at Durham, Maine. I didn't know if you.
Well, yeah, I think it says contact me at this number or the town manager or townmanager.gov, but then it's sign the select board chair.
I just didn't know if you wanted to put that as your email address, or if you want to leave it the way it is, it's fine. Just when I first read that, I thought maybe that was a typo.
I'm not worried about it.
He's more than likely gonna contact the chair through me, so that's why I put
Okay.
my
Yeah.
email in
Okay.
there. And the town office phone number. I didn't wanna hand out his phone number, and
Okay.
so that's why I did it that way.
Okay.
Works for me if it works for, as long as they know how to get a hold of us, so. Do you have another?
So the only thing I disagree with is one word in this, and that's the word strong support. Because I was totally against it. He made a good, compelling argument, and I support it. I don't know that I would say strong support. I don't mind leaving it in, but the argument he made, I think, convinced me that because of who we are as a society now, this is necessary. As much as I think it's absolutely ridiculous for there to be that many accidents on that road with that line of sight, there are, and it has become necessary. So, that's all.
Well, I'm fine with moving the word strong, I'm just saying, express our support.
Yeah. And while we do that, we maybe add a period to the end of that sentence.
All right, so I make a motion that we amend the letter of support to strike the word strong out of the first paragraph and add a period to the end of the first paragraph. And then accept the letter. That's my motion. Does anyone second it?
I'll second.
Josh seconds it. Do we have any additional discussion?
I'd just like to, I think we should note that we did have a couple emails come in on this topic from residents, and both were responded to by Dennis.
Yeah, I think the emails went to Dennis, but he CC'd us in his response.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but on the topic, some residents voiced some concern and they were responded to, and I think that was good.
Yeah, I appreciate Dennis's concern in providing the data as well. Do we have any other discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
fire department has no opinion, but we responded to a motor vehicle accident at that intersection today.
Yep, and we actually know that based off of the data, the incident rate has been pretty high every year, and I think that response puts us into like a
I
very
believe
high.
he said, again, without an opinion from us, 11th or 12th, in the entire state for intersections, it was that intersection, 11th or 12th highest, in the entire state.
Yeah.
Again, DOT's, but
Yeah, I see that intersection a lot on the scanner.
Just as you're going on the road.
Any other discussion on the motion? Thank you, Chief. All right, seeing none, all in favor of approving the letter as amended? Any opposition? Okay. We're already on the second page of the agenda. This is gonna be a quick meeting. Okay. We're gonna move into new business. We have a discussion here with the escrow agreement, and this is from George.
Well, George, I can
Yeah.
kind of lead into it. So right now, currently, we don't have an escrow agreement between the contractor and the town for performance guarantees. And George drafted up an agreement, and then we talked to the town attorney. And in the ordinance, there's no authority to give the town manager the authority to sign agreements with the contractor. And we would do this through efficiency. And I think Kristen sent an email to you, and I think it's included in your packet explaining her opinion or her recommendation. So we drafted up the order,
Yeah.
and you have the order in front of you. And that order upon your signatures would go into the land use.
Does anyone have
Good,
questions
so-
for Jerry on
And
this?
then George is here to answer. He's more familiar with these agreements than I am. So if you have some questions, go ahead and.
My only question is, this, they can be added to the land use ordinance without going to town meeting?
No, would not be added to the land use ordinance. It's
Okay,
just an administrative document.
okay, okay.
But it wouldn't get inserted there? I thought that's what Krista said. no?
She recommends it be inserted at the end of the master,
Right,
but just,
That would
So-
be the delegation of authority to the town.
Right.
right, just, it's not added to it. It's just in the master copy that you keep somewhere,
Yeah.
you keep it so you know what's there and it can be referred to in
Doesn't
the
have to be
future.
approved at town meeting.
No.
Okay, okay.
The
I think it's
master
because
copy of
we're
what?
delegating an authority that we have to Jerry.
Right.
To give him the opportunity to do that rather than making him go through us to do that.
Right, I'm in full support of that, I just wasn't
Yeah.
sure if it.
But it's a good clarification question.
Yeah, I just didn't know if we had to then go to town meeting if we were talking about the land use ordinance, but
Mm-hmm.
my question is answered, thank you.
And if folks want, we can just take a quick minute if someone wants to review any of the recommendation from Kristen, or if people are ready, we can I'd entertain a motion to
I read
approve.
that ahead of time, so I'm good.
I knew you did.
Do you want a second to read it?
No,
Would you-
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Then I'd make a motion.
We're halfway through the meeting, so.
I'd make a motion that we
Approve
approve the escrow agreement.
All right, and Josh has made a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second? Any additional discussion?
Can we get a target date of when we'll update the land use ordinance to include this as an appendix?
Again, it would not be an amendment to the land use ordinance, it would just be attached to the ordinance.
Right.
It won't even be an official appendix, so, you know, I think the intent is to have a public record that this has been delegated.
And you know where
Okay,
it
well, it
is.
does say here, did we just have this discussion and I kind of missed it? Shall be maintained as an official appendix to the master copy of the land use ordinance. To me, when I read it, I would
Yeah.
think that means I'm gonna see appendix blah, blah, blah in the ordinance.
Yeah, well, we can clarify if Kristen thinks that it needs to be approved at the town meeting, then certainly we can have that. But I think if it had required a town meeting vote, she wouldn't have put that before you as an order.
Well, Kristen just got here. We can give her more than 3 seconds to get in and ready. We were talking about you. No. Did you want to ask that?
Well,
I-
just,
I think it's
so
just-
if it's just filed with wherever you keep the master there, we're good.
I think that's the intent.
Okay.
Yeah, the way I envision it is if it's in the filing cabinet, this goes right behind it,
Okay.
and you pull it out with it. I do understand the confusion there about the wording where it says maintain as an official appendix.
I think the risk is slow of
Yeah.
any kind of future.
But I think this is just documenting that we have delegated that authority to Jerry,
Right.
as opposed to just saying, sure, go for it, and then there's no documentation other than the video recording, and we gotta file it somewhere.
I see this the same way as the select board delegated their authority for Jerry to sign liquor licenses. That's the way that I see this.
and it's just all in the name of efficiency to move it.
Because we were just saying yes when those came through and just slowed the process down and took up time.
Because they have to get before a meeting,
Mhm.
and like, they're getting held up doing things because they have to get in front of them, and they have to get on an agenda
'Cause we-
and get in the meeting,
yeah.
this is something that Jerry can handle, so.
Yeah, I'm fine with it as well.
Yeah.
Do we have any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposition? Perfect, we're approved. Kristen, just got here, do you need a second to get the computer?
Actually, to pull up the.
Yeah, no worries. Cool, well, first we're gonna, briefly have a discussion about Freedom of Information Act. You know, we all have gone through FOA training with the town legal counsel, and I know that, you know, we had brought up that, when we looked at it, all elected officials are required to go through a level of FOA training. And right now, I don't think we're facilitating any sort of FOA training for the, budget committee, who is elected and technically needs to go through FOA training. So we need to have a discussion on how we provide that opportunity, because it's a legal requirement to the budget committee. So I'd like to hear what people's thoughts are on that. So I should clarify, FOA is Freedom of Information Act.
Isn't there just a thing you read on the Secretary of State's website? And you
I-
just print a form and you sign it?
Is
Are
that,
we
yeah.
talking about?
Yeah, that can
'cause
be done.
that
It's
we-
not- It's not as in-depth. as-
So, and that's what I wanted to have the discussion, is what sort of training we want to make sure is provided there.
So I have comments about this.
Well, sure, I'll let Josh
Yeah,
finish
Oh,
up
go ahead.
first. Yeah, because the reason I bring this up, because that's the bare minimum, right? You read that and then you sign it. Then we also, we had a presentation from legal counsel on FOA, so we understood it. And then there's also like online trainings you can take for elected officials and then go through and get that process. So just wanted to make sure we have a discussion about making sure that's known to the budget committee and to make sure we provide them with that. So it sounds like you're in favor of just having them go through
Or
the basic process.
if we have Kristen or somebody else come do a presentation, we record it
Mhm.
and we can send it out in an email, play it at a meeting. I mean,
Mhm.
I can't imagine it's gonna be very long.
We had our presentation earlier, well, late last year, that was recorded too, so we could share that. But I'm open to other people's thoughts as well. Heather, you had some?
My thoughts were to do a workshop that included all of our boards, committees, and commission in one shot. And then if they weren't able to attend that workshop, either have it recorded and then have them watch it, or
Mhm.
do the MMA training. And the reason why I say that is because all of our boards and committees and commissions are subject to FOA. And I think that they, perhaps unintentionally or whatever, when they're all emailing back and forth, I don't think that people understand the rules necessarily around it, and in terms of record keeping and,
Well, I think to interject real thing, one people don't realize is that if you're discussing town business on your personal devices, that's subject to a Freedom of Information Act request. So someone can say, we need all emails and texts about this thing that the select board was talking about, or the budget committee, or the conservation commission, and that can be, I don't think people realize that,
Right.
so.
and so I think that without intentionally doing so, it's okay to do administrative acts outside of a public meeting, but when there's like any discussion about anything that's like happening in an upcoming meeting or in a previous meeting, and all the board members are part of that, that's constitutes an illegal meeting, and I don't think anyone's doing that intentionally, but I do think that could potentially be happening like on accident. And so I'm in favor of a workshop format for all boards, commissions, and committees to attend. And if they can't attend, then to either do the online training or have it recorded and have them watch it. I think it's something that really needs to be addressed.
I think that's a good idea, but I think that's for a later this year type thing. I think that we don't have time to do that between now and like the town meeting. But I think that we should at least in the interim issue the link to what you were talking about, Josh, reading the information and then signing off that you did it to all of the boards and committees with the plan of I always say next year, but I mean after April of this year, getting everyone together for one person FOA training, all the boards and committees. But there's some logistics we'd have to work out there, like space, that'd have to probably be at the school. And then we'd have to set up a time where people could see it. And then, because we had the presentation from Kristen, but we were kind of broad ranging in our discussion during that. So it's not really compartmentalized where we can say, go watch from minute, 17 to minute 27. We were kind of, as our conversations get sometimes, all over the place. So I think that the workshop is a great idea for after April, when we have our new iteration of the board. And
I think it would be a good time to do an onboarding process.
at the same time, we do this goal setting,
Well, I don't know if we could do it.
but
at the
like
same
in that
time.
same
Yeah.
general time frame. So I think that what I would like to do right now is just, we'll send out an email to all people who serve on the boards and commissions and elected, appointed, and all that, with a link to what you said, Josh, just to say that this needs to be completed within the next 30 days. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, and I think it should include like a formed roster or something.
Yeah.
That each
There's a
committee-
form you have to print and sign.
Yep. And so we can say that after you complete the form that you print and sign, you're gonna bring it to the town office, and then I can go through and double check based off who's received the email.
Or the
who's
chairs could
completed
just
it.
collect them at their next meeting, too,
Delegation, I like that.
you know?
Yeah,
I mean, that's a good
So-
work for the chairs.
we can do that. I don't think we need a motion for this, but we could.
I think it's fine to do a motion for it. 'cause then it's,
Sure.
like, on record.
I move that we send the town chairs a link to the appropriate documents to conduct FOA training and instruct them to have their membership completed within 30 days and return it to the town office. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor? Any opposition? Perfect. Can you put that on the check sheet? Perfect, thanks.
You should say what you said out loud.
Yeah, I asked Deb if she could put it on our check sheet of to-do,
Cash sheets.
task sheet. Okay. All right, well, now we want to move in, are you prepared for the contracts? Awesome. And Chief already escaped his mic. I don't know when he snuck away, but he made room. So. Calvin's brave enough to stay up. Oh, no, I was in too. Jerry, you going out of there? No, I'm kidding. Awesome. So we're just going to have a discussion here. The planning board already received a presentation similar to this to talk about the concept of contract zoning in the ordinance. And we're going to have that conversation here tonight with our town legal counsel. So.
Okay, and that was going to be my first question back was, do we want a general overview of contract zoning for the public as much as this group or?
Yeah, I think that a general overview, maybe a truncated version to what the planning board got is great to explain the concept, and then we can go through in more detail. And we can ask questions if that, but can we ask questions as we go?
Please do,
Right.
interrupt as you wish. Contract zoning is a statutory process that allows the town by ordinance to provide for contract zoning. And contract zoning is the ability to modify standards that apply under the ordinance or the types of uses that might be allowed in a district if a contract zoning agreement is proposed and accepted by the legislative body. So here in Durham, the legislative body is the town meeting, and any contract zoning agreement is not valid until it is presented to and approved by a town meeting. So if you think of it as sort of a mini amendment to the land use ordinance that only applies to a particular project on a particular parcel. That's probably the best way to think about it. Goes through the same legislative process. It works as an amendment to the zoning ordinance. It's attached to the zoning ordinance. And sort of, again, modifies the standards just for that parcel, for that project. And the idea is to be able to target the standards of review to that particular project, because perhaps it's a unique piece of land, or perhaps it's a type of project that it's just really hard to write standards for that are going to get us the best project in the best place every time. So it allows a developer to come to town and say, I want to do this particular project. However, maybe you don't provide for that use in your table of uses as something allowed in this district or any district. Or maybe I need to modify the lot size in order to accomplish what I need to do. Maybe I need to modify frontages in order to accomplish what I need to do. And in exchange for that, there's typically some modifications that are made to the development to suit the town. So perhaps the town wants to ensure that there's public access to the shore through a residential development on a lake. Perhaps there's going to be a project that has a big draw for utilities. And so you require them to establish a new utility corridor that not only benefits them, but benefits, properties along the way. So there's this concept of it is a contract, it is an agreement, and both parties get some consideration out of it. So the consideration the developer gets is some terms of the ordinance get modified in their favor. The consideration the town gets is
you can sort of mold the development in the way that you want. In a way that the planning board really doesn't have authority to do, because they only have authority to apply the performance standards that are already in the ordinance. Yeah, they can put conditions on, but the limits on what they can do are much more confined in that case than what contract zoning can accomplish. So, you know, examples would be like Rock Row in Westbrook was all done through contract zoning. I represent the city of Belfast. They did their harbor walk through contract zoning by requiring those parcels when they sold to use that process to develop. And when they were developed through contract zoning, they, you know, had to keep a path to the shore. So that's the overview.
Real quick,
Yeah.
do most municipalities have contract zoning as an option?
I would say most do. It's certainly a developing and developed community sort of concept. I will say that I really like the idea for Durham because of the fact that it's a rural community, that there's not a lot of commercial industrial development here yet, and not a lot of residential scale development here yet. And perhaps you're not ready to take the full leap into, like, we're gonna do large-scale residential and zone appropriately with tiny lot sizes and clustered development. We're not ready to do that. We wanna see a project as it comes and determine whether, in this neck of the woods, it makes sense with the way it's proposed, and that the roads are good enough to serve it, and the utilities, which we don't have public utilities, you know, are they serving them? So I think it's a way that Durham can sort of control its destiny here for a little while without going whole hog into
Like
a lot
developing
of
like
different
light
kinds of
commercial zoning
Yeah.
or heavy commercial, okay.
Right, because this is a town that doesn't have a defined commercial area and a defined residential area. So it's really more about, does that project work on that parcel, and do we like it in general? So,
So when the contract is being developed and proposed, what sort of things could the municipality ask for as part of the agreement? Because my understanding is that contract zoning is you're essentially entering into a contract with the community to do something outside of the traditional confines of that zone, so contract zoning. And so my thought process, if someone wants to, maybe this is a little absurd, but if someone wants to put a rocket launching facility in town, that's something that we don't have anything written down for. What are the sorts of like scale of things that you can ask for in the contract zoning agreement?
so the statute limits us only to the physical development of the property, physical development and use of the property, but I can extrapolate that pretty far. So anything certainly that we can look at in a review of an application, so is it public safety, is it utilities, is it siting on a property, is it roads?
So if someone isn't proposing a project and that developer is going to require a lot of water, is there a possibility to say, well, if you're establishing the supply you need for heavy water use, along the route we want you to install hydrants?
Exactly.
That's the kind of thing we can ask
Yep.
for?
Yep.
Okay.
Or, you know, I'll use the waterfront development again. You know, we have very few means of waterfront access in this town. We're gonna require you to preserve a public easement to the shore. And that makes sense because we already think about these things when we approve applications. Would the planning board be able to mandate somebody to put in a public easement? No. But under contract zoning, yes.
And who negotiates the contract up front with applicants?
So the way this draft ordinance would work is a developer would submit a contract zoning application to the town through the town manager. The town manager would engage the town planner and the town attorney, and we would do a preliminary review of the package, sort of an analysis of the cost benefit. I would look at the contract zoning agreement itself and see what areas we could push or restrict, or whether we think it complies with the comprehensive plan. It's very important in contract zoning, as with all zoning, that we don't do things that are directly in conflict with the comprehensive plan. So, you know, if the district is described as agricultural, we're not gonna allow a rocket launching facility in it. But if there's wiggle
I
room
won't
under the
apply for it.
language, if it's more vague, if it's generalistic, there's usually a path. So we will look at that stuff preliminarily. Then we schedule a public hearing that goes through, that's held by the planning board and the select board directly.
So at this point, it's the town attorney and the town manager who have received the information, and then from the town manager and the town attorney, it comes to a public hearing, or is it
Correct.
handed to the select board before that?
We would probably, I think in a workshop or something, let you all know about it.
Mhm.
A lot of times a developer wants to come and introduce the project and the concept before they even submit the plan. So, you know, I think for a larger development with somebody wanting to use this process, they're probably gonna wanna come in, have a workshop, talk about the select board's priorities, their priorities, and kinda get some ideas on how they're going to draft that agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would officially submit the application after that. That's what I'm used to seeing. But the process would allow somebody to come in sort of cold turkey and drop an application on our desk. And we deal with it in that way.
Okay.
So the idea is that staff sort of does some preliminary massaging of the agreement into what we think would be more palatable or interesting to the select board. Then it goes to this joint hearing of the planning board and the select board. And there's no obligation under this process that it's one meeting and done. It can be this iterative process where the planning board might, you know, have some ideas, the select board might have some ideas, and you send the developer off to make some changes.
And that
and come
joint
back to the
hearing,
next meeting.
sorry, that joint hearing is open for the public input as
It
well.
is.
And so what I'm seeing here is that if they're essentially asking for a contract zone from the legislative body, which is the voters, they're saying, we're applying and presenting to the voters at this time of what we want to do, and then that's being facilitated by the select board and the budget committee.
Right,
So
as
does
with
that
all
mean,
ordinances, you're the conduit.
planning board, sorry. So does that mean like the budget, the select board and the planning board can't say up front, we don't even want to hear this application if they've indicated that we're applying for contract zoning?
If you hate it,
Yeah.
they can make an application, but if you hate it and the planning board hates it, you could absolutely send them away in the very first meeting. You know, you go through the
At that
process.
public hearing?
Yeah, the public
But
hearing.
so what I'm getting at is the public's always gonna have a chance to input on it,
Public voice would have a chance.
whether
to-
yay or nay to
Yeah.
continue,
Yep.
okay?
Yep. Because the first step in the official process is a public hearing,
Okay.
which mandates that the public be heard. You know, in real life, probably there's gonna be a public hearing, some discussion between the boards and applicant. They go back, they make some changes, they present it to you again. Maybe you've already heard enough public comment on it, and now they're just responding to that public comment, so maybe you don't take public comment at meeting number 2, or meeting number 3, and it's just sort of the nuts and bolts of the agreement we're talking about at that point. But there will always be the opportunity for public hearing. And then you take it to town meeting, of course, which is its own public hearing in itself, and nothing is stopping the board from having, you know, another public hearing before town meeting too.
So just to clarify the bullet points here, someone indicates that they want to apply for contract zoning, they look at our town ordinance and they say, oh, what I want to do in this town says that I need to go through contract zoning. They develop an application and submit it to the town manager, and it gets reviewed by the town manager and legal counsel. And then at that point, they can do an application. It's likely that they'll come forward and say, we want to meet with the select board at a meeting to present what we're talking about. From there, the next step is a public hearing, and then discussing the merits of that contract, the give and take, and there can be additional public hearings and feedback. So if we hear, we like this project, but only if we get X, Y, Z from the community, then we can say, that's what we're gonna need to see in an application, and then they come back to our governing body. And then ultimately, once a contract is framed out and one that's mutually agreed upon, it then goes to the actual town meeting, and everyone at town gets to vote on whether it's approved.
Correct.
Okay, so ultimately, the permit and the contract zone is awarded by the town.
The town.
But
And they have
then
no
they-
rights at all up until that point.
Okay, and then does the applicant still have to meet the requirements for other permits, like site review and stuff like that through the
Absolutely.
planning board?
Yep.
Okay,
So the contract zoning agreement, just a couple of things on the process you just outlined. In theory, the select board could feel warm about a contract zoning proposal, but say, town meeting decides this is a democratic process, we're gonna give them all the information they need to make the decision here. Maybe we'll make a recommendation against it or for it, but we're gonna pass it on just because we want the democratic process to play out. The planning board's role in this is advisory only, so they take a vote first, and their vote is to either recommend or not recommend, or recommend with changes. And the select board's not bound by their recommendation, it's just sort of advisory to you. And their job principally is to look at this issue of does it comport with the comprehensive plan? So, there is a scenario where the planning board votes, they don't like it, the select board votes you do and you wanna put it forward, or vice versa.
Okay.
Um,
Definitely puts a
Then
lot
the-
of that power into the legislative body of the town.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of towns where contract zoning is used, quite frankly, it's not a town meeting town, it's a town council town. And so this is more of a fast-paced process. But here, it will be a very slow process. So we were talking about this, the planning board, and I think it's gonna be the rare developer or development that wants to take advantage
There's
of
a lot
this
of risk
process.
for the developer.
Ton of risk, you know, they've gotta put their plan together, because we need to see the plan, at least in a sketch format, as part of the application. They're gonna need to work on some preliminary engineering and be able to answer all their questions. And then potentially, like, you know, we're probably only gonna put this on for an annual town meeting. So it could be a 10-month process before it even goes to the vote. So it would be, again, the rare development where somebody's choice is better in using contract zoning than just modifying some things and conforming with what we already have, or going elsewhere. And then in terms of the land use approvals, the way this is written, we can modify basically any, sort of like a dimensional standard that might apply to a project. That anything else that we don't specifically modify in that agreement is gonna come under the regular town ordinances. So they're still, no matter what, they still have to get their site plan approval or their subdivision approval or anything that applies. If it's for a particular use where we have specific standards like mineral extraction or solar or whatever it is, all those standards are still going to apply unless we've modified them.
So, example right now, we have a solar ordinance. We have requirements for what buffering and things like that. So if the town were to agree for a contract, if solar were to be required for contract zoning, let's say, and the town were to agree to a contract zone for solar that says, sure, we allow the applicant to put solar here, they still have to meet all the standards outlined in the town's solar ordinance unless the contract zoning agreement explicitly said you don't need this buffer, or that is already lined up.
Correct.
And that then gives the opportunity for the community itself to have that vote as well. Okay.
Right. Yep.
So unless it's explicitly modified, it goes to the standards already in the land use ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
Contract zoning process, by the way, is not appealable, because at the end of the day, it's a legislative act. So nobody could use an appeal process to try to challenge it. If they wanted to say, okay, you didn't follow the ordinance, or you know, it doesn't comply with the comprehensive plan, then in theory, they could bring a lawsuit on that point to challenge the zoning. But I've not ever seen that happen, at least not successfully.
Heather?
I have a question about marijuana, because I think it was in 2018, the town voted to opt out of that, and so if contract zoning were to pass and the town voted to opt out, it doesn't exist in our land use ordinance. Is there a pathway for that because we opted out through contract zoning?
No, because and cannabis really is like the one area that I can think of where you wouldn't be able to use this process because of the opt-out.
Okay.
You know, the statute requires you to have opted in before anybody can make that application, and that's totally separate from the contract zoning thing.
And
Thank you.
to that point, question outside of the cannabis question. So when we'll get into the details of this in a second here, but you know, my understanding is we're gonna have a proposal to say 2 types of projects require contract zoning. Does that mean that it is only limited in scope to those 2, or could someone who wants to do, let's say, a subdivision, our normal clustered development come through and say, I wanna go through I don't foresee someone wanting to do this, but could they say, I wanna go through the contract zoning process for this 12-unit subdivision rather than the normal process?
Yeah, so the way this is written now, anybody could make an application to use contract zoning on any lot for any use anywhere in town.
Mhm.
And it's gonna go through the whole process we just outlined. But for a couple of designated uses, no matter where it is, you would have to use contract zoning if you wanna have that type of development in this town.
Mhm.
So, you know, right now, the proposal on the table is for battery energy storage. This is a prime example of the type of project that it's really hard to say, yeah, it can go in District X, because it might be okay on one parcel and horrible on another within a certain district. So we're going to say we wanna be able to look at the whole package of the proposal to decide whether that makes sense as proposed. And because it comes with it, you know, a bunch of different risks than we're used to dealing with or prepared to deal with. We wanna look at it as a total package, so we're mandating contract zoning being used for that type of project.
I see it as really helpful for a community like Durham where we might have standards for some activities, but we haven't gone through the process of saying where those activities would be preferred to take place
Yeah.
in town. So I think of things like prime agricultural soils, like maybe that's not a good place for a project, whereas an old gravel pit could be a good place or something like that. And that seems like it gives us the community that opportunity through this, right?
It does.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we have any more questions on the concept of contract zoning before we get into the draft ordinance? Okay, I'll just give it right to you to start at the top or wherever you
Okay,
want.
you wanna just work our way through?
Yep.
Okay. It is not long, thankfully, so I'll keep you awake. We'll start with section A. So that refers to the statute that I've referenced, section 4352, which says contract zoning is authorized. It says that it may include conditions or restrictions that relate to the physical development of land, and that it has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So that comes straight from the statute. And contract zoning is to promote the general welfare of the residents of the town. Selectmen may approve a contract zoning request for placement on the town warrant only if it determines in its discretion that the contract zoning is in the public interest. Very general term there, and subjective, you know, on purpose, and that it will have beneficial effects on the town as a whole.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Yep.
Is that okay? I do not, this does not bother me at all that it says selectmen, but MMA, like, put out guidance to say that things should change to select board. I do not care, I think if we're gonna like update our stuff, we should update.
Yeah,
this.
we have changed all of our literature in town and all of our documents to say select board. And so we've had this discussion of like if something refers to selectmen, but we call it our select board, does that still count? Because it says, well, that's for the select men, not the select board. So this was before you were here, so we had to just speculate at these things.
Yeah, the statutes still generally say Board of Selectmen. I pulled this from the land use ordinance, currently uses Board of Selectmen, so
Yeah.
for consistency's sake. I know you guys are doing a codification.
Mm-hmm.
One idea would be that for consistency, since this is just an amendment to the zoning ordinance, to use Board of Selectmen consistently, and then in the codification, update every single
Okay.
occurrence with Select Board.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Application process, already been over this, but, you know, notwithstanding any time that the applicant may have come in for something less formal in front of the board, eventually they submit an application for contract zoning to the town manager. It has to include at minimum, a map showing where it's gonna be located, the address, the property owner's information, evidence of their ownership or interest in the property, a site analysis that describes the major features of the property, and then a conceptual development plan showing the layout of all of the, you know, the buildings, the parking areas, the driveways, utilities, buffers, things like that. So you really get a sense of what's gonna go where on the development. It's not going to have every topographical detail and, a street design plan and everything that it would have when it later goes to the planning board, but it can be, you know, at the end of the day, they're at your mercy.
So
So the board can always request more detail on certain elements.
What an example here might be, it's not gonna show you an exact to scale everything, but it might say, here's our proposed development with this foot buffer and all that sort of stuff, and it might not show you exactly how that all looks.
Correct.
It's more of a that, like you said, a conceptual.
Yeah, if you've ever
Design.
seen a sketch plan that goes
Yeah.
in front of the planning board, more at that level of
Okay.
detail. And then they give you the proposed contract zoning agreement. This is usually, you know, let's say it's a 3 or 4 page agreement. About a third of it's gonna be boilerplate
Mm-hmm.
that deals with, you know, their timelines to complete the development, what happens if they don't comply, various things like that. And the meat of it will usually be reduced to like a page or 2, so that it's pretty, you know, palatable for people to read in town and understand what it's going for.
And that, sorry to jump in, but at this juncture here, when they say, here's our contract agreement, is that where they're first saying, this is what we wanna do that's different within your zoning, and here's what we're offering in it for that?
Correct.
Okay, so that's where they kinda make the first offer
Yep.
of like, here's what we're gonna do.
Yep.
And so this is prepared entirely by them and not at the cost of our
Correct.
town, okay?
Yep. Now, let's assume they've probably had a meeting with planning, and the town manager, just, you know, developers wanna know stuff about the community, they wanna
And
know
probably
what the
the-
board is
the
likely to
board
wanna
too.
see. Yeah, so I don't expect it to ever really come in a total vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have had some input. So they submit that application, but, at that process, that's where now we're gonna work on the agreement itself. And if they don't have provisions in there that should be, I'd add them in. If we know that there are certain issues that are gonna be important to the select board, we can say, you know, we know public access is really important in this town, or the siting of this is gonna be problematic because you could have put it here in the residential areas, you know, closer to where you've chosen to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to them, they can modify it and re-present it, they can,
Mm-hmm.
go with what they initially presented.
Mm-hmm. And also, if in this first initial town manager review process, the town manager, the code enforcement officer flag something of note that says they can then, that's where this
Yeah.
I is here, yep.
Yep. And an application fee, which we don't yet have, but it'll go in your regular fee schedule.
Can you give us a ballpark of what those application fees usually look like?
I mean,
I mean-
this is, contract zoning is a significant process that involves a lot of staff time, so I think it should be a hefty fee.
So you're in thousands, not hundreds.
Definitely, I would think around 2,000 at the minimum.
That's just to put the application on the desk.
Yep, exactly. So then, when it's all in a reasonably final form,
Mm-hmm.
we work as part of the agenda to call the public hearing. And that's gotta work for the planning board too, because they'll also be in attendance.
Mm-hmm.
So now we are in section 4.
Sorry, so section 3 is just saying this has to meet, the town manager or the designee just reviews it all.
Yep,
And at this point, it says, yep, all the things in section 1 have been checked here, this is complete. Not commenting on the value of it, but saying this, they're bringing everything to the table that we asked.
exactly.
Okay.
And I shouldn't have skipped over, there's a robust public notice process, so it's
At least 14
Publication.
days, yeah.
plus notice directly to anybody who's within 500 feet of the boundaries of the affected parcels.
Mm-hmm.
And you could make
This-
that larger if you wanted.
This is nitpicky, but is it within 500 feet of the project footprint or within 500 feet of the boundary of the parcel that the project
Boundary
is
of the
on?
parcel, so if they
Okay.
had a 40-acre parcel.
They
and
can't just
1
put it in the
acre is being
middle and
developed,
say,
you
yeah.
run that 500 feet from the parcel
Okay.
boundary.
We love nitpicky stuff here, so,
That's better now than later.
yeah.
Did you notice how he pointed right at me?
I did, that was a Freudian slip there, I didn't mean to. I did actually go, we love nitpicky stuff, that was my bad, I'm sorry. I went like this though, both of us.
That's, you know, you should wear that proudly.
I do.
Yes, that's not a complaint.
So then, section 4 goes into some pretty specific detail about how that meeting is run. There's a presentation by the applicant, town staff makes comments, the planning board and board of selectmen discuss, or the select board discuss, and can ask questions. You hear from the public, the applicant provides any response, and then, you know, the planning board is gonna consider the land use implications and the comprehensive, plan implications. And the select board is going to discuss whatever it wants to discuss. At that point, you can do one of two things. If it's ready for a vote, in favor or opposed, the planning board takes a vote to recommend or not recommend. And then the select board takes a vote to put it on town meeting warrant or not.
So those are live votes at that meeting,
Correct.
or we don't have enough, we think we need more given from the applicant based off of public comment and board concerns.
Correct.
You could say we're gonna need to have you come back with a better offer.
Yeah, I mean, and think of the planning board process too. There's a little flavor of that here. You know, we're just not sure on what the noise impacts of this project are going to be. So we're either going to require you, applicant, to come back with a really granular noise impact analysis provided by somebody you hire, or, you know, we want to hire somebody to advise us on this.
Does it make sense at this meeting to have legal counsel there in case we have questions right then, so?
For the hearing, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Besides, I think anytime, it's gonna be so infrequent that one of these projects comes up. You know, boards often have to relearn the process every time, so it's helpful to have legal counsel.
Yeah, it might be
sort of walking
several
through.
iterations of the board before it's
Yeah.
experienced again.
And there are some legal lines that are drawn, of course, and you might need some guidance on, well, the public's requesting this and this, you know, are we allowed to ask for that? For instance, you know, housing development I was working on through contract zoning, the public, particularly the residents of the development, were concerned about their rents. And they wanted to make sure that rents didn't go up. And the council was prepared very much to say, yeah, we want to put some rent controls in here. But you can't actually do that as part of contract zoning because it doesn't relate to the physical development of the property. So it was good they had
So-
their lawyer there to say, oh, whoa, can't do that.
Quick side question. So I know that we are determining the contract here and as a community. Could that say, for example, I think of like if we were to have a proposed like very large development that adds to a lot of valuation to the town. I know that some of our resources from the state, you know, what's called profit sharing, right? When the state helps revenue sharing, that's the word I'm looking for. Revenue sharing, school funding, stuff like that might change once the town valuation increases.
Yes.
Can you request that they fund economic analysis of that to figure out the total impact that the project might have? It might sound great, you're bringing a lot of valuation in, but does that mean we're getting less of the assistance we normally get?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a really good question, Joe.
Someone else must have said it and I just heard it because I don't usually come up with good questions like that.
It is very smart thinking because a lot of times an applicant like this will come in and say, we're gonna add $20 million in valuation to your town, but they're not looking at the net. And the net, I mean, the net is still usually positive, don't get me wrong, but it's usually not a $20 million net. So, and then, you know, we're gonna add $20 million worth of valuation to your town, but we're also going to add 140 more students to your school district that now we're gonna have taxation related to. So, yeah, and there is specific in paragraph 5, if the board determines that professional assistance is necessary, you can request the applicant to make a deposit in escrow to permit such review.
And that's where we request funds that the amount we request there could be determined on what we think we need for information. So it's not limited to, well, you need a small escrow account. It might be, we need you to deposit $10,000, $15,000 into an escrow
And the
account.
applicant's choice at that point is,
Well,
I
this-
think that's unreasonable, I don't wanna pay it, we're out of here.
yeah.
Or it's, you know.
So it sounds like the
we're gonna
whole
browse
process
for
here, if they don't like what the town's asking for, the solution is buy.
Exactly.
Not, oh, well, let's negotiate that, you know.
Yeah, and that's a refreshing change from the usual planning board process,
Mhm.
where they have to make specific findings, they have to find something under the ordinance to deny it based on,
Mm-hmm,
and then they still risk that the applicant might appeal because the reasons they gave weren't good enough.
mm-hmm,
Under contract zoning, you can just basically be like, no, we don't like it, you know, bye.
mm-hmm. Interesting. Sorry for all the interruptions.
Okay, so, we are now on 6, which is just, again, there's no end date to the number of meetings that one would have on this. Potentially, there could be any number of iterations back and forth of the agreement and conversations about it. You might, let's say the planning board has heard enough at meeting 1, but the select board hasn't. Planning board could make a recommendation on meeting 1, but the select board could continue through meetings 2, 3, and 4,
Mhm.
for instance.
Can that
And
work vice versa?
Probably not, because under the way this is written, the planning board goes first in terms of making its recommendation. And then it proceeds more to deliberations of the select board.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
When we get to the town meeting part of it, is it like so the planning board makes their recommendation when they're ready to make their recommendation, and then we get all the way through it, we go to town meeting? Is it just the select board at that point that's making the recommendation, or is it like how on our budget, the budget committee and the select board recommendations are on the warrant?
Yeah, I would say, it's not mandated under the ordinance amendment here, but I would say to put both on there.
Mm-hmm. So
And-
the community knows when they're voting.
Yeah,
Both boards agree, both boards disagree, or the boards are split.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep,
I imagine the applicant usually wants to make their offer, so to say, one that aligns with both boards, though, for
absolutely.
the best chance. Okay.
Absolutely.
And real quick on the process, and you might get to this, but say the process begins and there's a town meeting in 2 months. There's no requirement, and there's no requirement for us to say you get a chance at the town floor the next town meeting. It's the town meeting after we're all ready. So we can say it could be a 14-month process before you're getting a vote from the community.
It could.
Okay.
Yep. The select board is 100% the gatekeeper of whether and when it goes to town meeting. So, while we don't like to act in bad faith and drag somebody
Right.
around just because, it is certainly within your discretion to say, yeah, this is all moving too fast, we're not gonna have it ready. Okay, so the planning board takes its advisory vote, then the select board takes its vote at some point within 30 days of the close of the full hearing process. And again, you either vote that it's gonna go on the warrant, or that it's not, and they're done. And that's really the end of the game for the developer at that point. They can't go to a court of appeals or anything, like I said.
So the developer doesn't show up to the town meeting to plead their case?
They can,
Okay.
absolutely. You know, they have to go through the process of being recognized as,
Yeah.
out of town and.
Yeah.
And it's usually good to,
I mean, I would imagine if something were to go through, I would imagine we would want them to present at the town meeting to make sure people have an ample understanding in case they hadn't participated in the previous public hearings, but.
yeah, I mean, or possibly the better way to do it that, is less partial to the developer is to have the planner give the presentation,
Mhm.
and then the developer is there to answer questions.
George goes, great.
I feel
Like,
like public speaking. I can do it,
yeah.
either way.
How about team?
But yeah, people don't generally love to have, the snake oil salesman from out of town come in
Yeah.
and pitch to them. They want to hear it from the people who work for them.
Mhm.
So, let's say that it has gone to town meeting, and it has been approved. The applicant, well, up until that point, the applicant can always change their mind and bail and withdraw their agreement until it appears on that warrant. Let's say it does get approved, it's not going to mandate that the developer do that development. at the end of the day. We don't ever want to force anybody to complete a development, because then you end up with companies that are bankrupt, or where it's not a good business decision going through with something and then ultimately it doesn't go well. So we allow them to not develop the property in accordance with the contract zoning agreement, but if they are going to do this development, it has to be done to the letter of that contract zoning agreement.
So
That
they
makes
get
sense.
they get the green light, but it's not a forced start.
Correct.
Can you put a time limit on that green light to say, you know, if construction doesn't start within 12 months, then additional approval would be required?
In paragraph C3,
Mm-hmm.
I of course did not put page numbers on this document, but the contract zoning agreement itself will have provisions for termination of the contract if the proposed development is not commenced or completed by certain stated deadlines. They have to start sometime within 2 years from approval by town meeting, and they have to complete no more than 3 years following the day they start.
Okay.
So, 5 years max.
Because one of the things I think about, like, not that I would imagine this to happen, but if a type of development were to be proposed and they receive the contract zoning, the next, if someone else comes in and wants to do the exact same thing in another site, the town may say, we only want one of these in town, not two of these, so we need to make sure that we know whether the first one's gonna actually happen or not after we've given them that. And so that gives a little bit of wiggle room there in terms of, if they don't actually start it, you can say, okay, we're now ready to entertain another offer, so to say.
And there's some wiggle room downward from the states, and if you think, you know, this works in our community today with the pattern of development we have and what's on the adjacent properties, things change fast, right? And so we don't wanna have to make a decision today when things might change drastically, and our analysis of what's a public benefit versus a risk might be completely different in a year or two. So for development X, we might say, you will have 1 year to start and 2 years to finish, or whatever it may be, whatever's reasonable. But the idea is that, you know, we are really looking at this holistically based on the full set of facts today. We're not gonna let them come in 5 or 10 years later with this project that now doesn't fit for whatever reason, or that people would have never approved 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think an example is if something's approved and then for some stroke of a miracle, the adjacent landowner decides to give the town a town park. All of a sudden it's like, it's been 2 years, you haven't done anything. It's not the same town anymore. Now you need to come back and we need to talk again.
Yep.
When you brought something that was kind of raised a red flag for me about the fact that like all of this legwork could happen, but then they could not follow through. And for me, I'm wondering what kind of assurance along the way, like I can just imagine how many hours like the planner's gonna put into this, right? And that's like town resources that are getting used. So how do we cover ourselves financially for the legwork that the town's gonna put into it if they can just walk away from it? I wouldn't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, one way is by setting that application fee high enough that it helps defray that, you know, accounting for, let's be realistic, you know, probably 25 staff hours and 5 attorney hours in that process. So we think about, you know, how much of that is reasonable to expect the applicant to defray, and how much do we eat because, you know, it's just part of our process. But part of it is that. Part of it is making sure, as we go through the process, that the developer is serious and that they're doing things according to schedule. They're not dragging things out unrealistically. Because again, we can put a halt to it at any time by just, you know, we're gonna bring this to a hearing and we're gonna say no.
Is there an opportunity when setting up like the escrow account to say, the scope and scale of this is putting a lot of effort, a lot of taxing on our town staff, so we need you to set up an escrow account to provide for contract staff to handle some of this administration? Or does that escrow only have to be for like double checking their work with a consultant or something?
It's written as professional assistance, which is
Okay.
a very broad term. So that could be you're gonna use the COG to get some contract planner help, or you're gonna go to, you know, some company for contract planner help, or you need my help
Yeah,
I think that it's perfectly realistic to put legal fees under there, anything you'd need, up to and including fancy engineers.
mm-hmm. Perfect.
So yeah, you can control for a lot of that. It is a risk, but you know what? I mean, the average planning board project of a certain scale is a risk too, because you've got a lot of George's time into it, a lot of planning board time into it. So there's always that risk. Generally speaking though, developers who pursue this process are really into it. You know, they're not kind of playing around.
And I'm gathering they're usually the scale that they have the financial backing that
Correct.
these sorts of fees aren't scaring them away.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. They've made a cost-benefit analysis that, and a lot of these, you know, companies that come in a process like this, they're working on a nationwide scale. They're used to bureaucracy. They're used to time frames taking forever. So, you know, they are, if anything, they're put off by small town government, but they're not put off by a long process.
We're not that mean,
And high fees.
you know?
Yeah.
So they don't like us, it's not the fee that bothers them.
No, I mean, I expect a developer to be like, town meeting? What's town meeting? You know,
Yeah.
why do I have to go to a Saturday, you know, meeting and explain this project to a bunch of people? But
So we give someone the opportunity to experience their first town meeting, and I think
Exactly.
that's a gift to them, you know, so. Does anyone have any questions so far?
No. Okay, moving into C then, under the header contract zoning agreement. The agreement has to include an enforcement provision. The way these are enforced is really just like any other violation of any other ordinance is enforced. Through the code enforcement officer, we can go to court, we can mandate they do whatever they promised they were gonna do as part of this agreement, or we can impose penalties. We could also, you know, if a predicate to their development was installing some special utility line, and they haven't done that, but they're building the development anyway, we could get an injunction against the development proceeding, because they haven't done step one of the contract. And then there's a list in number 2 there of the types of things that we might require of the development. So it might be limitations on the way the facility is used, maybe it's hours of operation or days of the week. Maybe it's the way traffic flows in and out. Maybe it's where buildings go, where buffers are, where open space is preserved. Contributions toward the provision of municipal services impacted by the development. So I want to touch on that one for a second. Because a lot of people are like, okay, contract zoning, what do we get out of it? We want some balloon payment from the developer, sort of to make us feel better about letting you do the project. That's not what this is talking about. It's usually contributions in kind. So let's use battery energy storage. It has a higher fire risk and might need special kinds of firefighting foam or equipment. I don't really know. But if our fire department doesn't have those resources, perhaps they are providing equipment and training at the developer's cost as part of the agreement.
I think an example of that is, like, I grew up in a municipality that had a paper mill, and when the mill went in, the mill bought a special ladder truck because there wasn't a truck that could accommodate the height of the structures already existing in that town. And in that example, they kept it on site so the fire department could just get it there. Is that
Yes.
something that, I don't know if that was done through contract zoning, but is that something?
That is
That-
something you could do.
yeah.
Yep. I remember working on a big tank in South Portland, and they needed, I think it was called a screamer or something. It was a mobile piece of firefighting equipment that would be left on site but belonged to the fire department, similar kind of thing. Another example might be, as you know, developers love private roads. Residential developers love private roads. They'll build a big, huge development and have it served by private roads that have homeowners associations that inevitably don't take great care of their roads. There's no road connectivity from this development to that road. So it would be pretty common in something like this to say, okay, we want you to build a road of good quality that's going to connect from point A to point B and serve your development, and it's going to be a town road. And, it's going to be built to spec, and maybe you're going to escrow money to take care of it in its first 10 years or something like that. again, not usually cash, not usually, you know, one of these payments in lieu of taxes. But there's a lot of opportunity to work with them within the confines of what this provides.
Well, and that's a good point too. Everything you've mentioned so far is in addition to the property tax expense that they would incur after the project is
Correct.
in place, so.
Okay, we talked about termination, which is number 3. Number 4, effects of the agreement. So if you have a contract zoning agreement related to a particular piece of property, which it always does, that contract zoning agreement runs with the land, meaning they can sell the development to party A, party B, whether it's pre-development or post-development. And yeah, that third party that has acquired the parcel gets the benefit of the contract zoning agreement, but they also have to, you know, comply with all of its terms. And so I might, if I'm writing a contract zoning agreement, I might have some provision for assignment that says if you sell this and assign it to somebody else, we get to vet that somebody else to make sure that they have the capacity to follow through with whatever else needs to be done. Number 5, sorry, the contract zoning agreement may allow for changes, and it can specify the procedure for approval. So you can say something like minor changes can be approved by the town manager, or it could be approved by the select board alone after a public hearing, whatever we want to put in there. So maybe we have minor changes are process A, major changes, we go through the whole contract zoning process again.
What defines the scope of minor versus major?
We define it in the agreement, but generally I would say minor would be in line with what already is in the land use ordinance, like, you know, things that are not known at the time of application but crop up on the site. Like maybe there's a ledge here, so they have to move the building over by 100 feet or something.
But don't change the nature
They
of the
don't change
project.
the substantive, like anything that the board would have taken as a pro or con against the development.
Okay.
So we try to put the right language around that. And then number 6 is just, they don't get any rights to the project. So even if they've endured a grueling years-long process, they still don't get any rights in that process unless town meeting has voted up.
It sounds like this process really just puts the ball in the court of the town.
Absolutely.
Like, it's just like really robust and very much a direct democracy there, because ultimately it's the court of public opinion. They can't appeal it. They're not guaranteed the project, and they've got to appease the voter base.
Exactly. I mean, one of the fundamental flaws of land use ordinances is that and comprehensive plans for that matter, is we're trying to prognosticate what's going to happen with the town. We're trying to generalize what's good in this area versus that area. And so many times, right, this is why we're always modifying our land use ordinances every single year, because things come up that we didn't anticipate, or things change. And
Just new scope and scale of projects that, you know, you can't make an exhaustive list of every possible thing someone could
exactly.
ever
I mean,
want
if you
to
look at your
develop.
table of uses, for instance, you know, certainly it doesn't have everything under the
No
sun.
rocket launching facility
And-
listed,
right.
you know?
And sometimes it's wicked hard to figure out where something falls under that chart, because maybe it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's just that, you know, these ordinances are not built for a lot of flexibility. And when the planning board acting alone, you know, tries to employ that flexibility, often it's running into trouble with appeals and stuff like that.
Well, one of the big values I see here is that oftentimes in public policy, you see the proceedings on how a policy was developed and understand its intent, and then when it gets applied, someone figures out a loophole or someone figures out something and says, that's really not, and the person who wrote the policy or was an advocate for it goes, that's not really what the intent was, but it is technically allowed, so it has to go through. Whereas this seems like, since it's a site-by-site, application-by-application, you're crafting that policy agreement for not any project, but this specific project. And I think that's a huge strength.
And so many times, in smaller towns in particular, where we're always kind of behind the 8 ball because town meeting is slow, and you know, it's hard to get something in front of the voters, we end up playing catch up so much. So somebody comes in and makes a proposal, and then there's an oh no moment where we realize, oh, we don't have the standards for this, or we don't have the category of use for this, and where does it fall? And typically what we do is we throw a moratorium on something under a special town meeting, and then we spend some months-long process trying to evaluate this type of use, when really it's like one application that drives it. And we may never get that application again for 10 years. And now we've created a whole category of use and standards to try to just get at this one development. So if we have contract zoning in place as a process, then what we do when we have that oh no moment now is instead of a moratorium, we could have a special town meeting that says, sure, you can do this if it's by contract zoning. So now we have that process where, yeah, the planning board is gonna look at it, but also town meeting is gonna look at it, and at the end of the day, we decide whether we like this project, rather than try to generalize all projects of that type.
I really like that idea, because then it's, like you said, rather than we need to put a 6-month block on this, develop a whole process, just like, yeah, sure, contract zoning, and then the applicant could present, and then you immediately start that process that involves the entire community. I think there's a lot of strength there for a town like Durham, you know, because we do need to add more to our tax base to help manage expenses, but it needs to be the right kind of project. It can't just be anything, so.
And you just don't have that granular level of detail in the ordinance with, 20 different zones. You're not there yet.
Yeah. I don't have any other questions. Does anyone else? I know I always talk a lot, so I think I get it out of the way.
I just wanted to ask George if he had anything he wanted to add or that you wanted us to know from your perspective about this. If it's no, it's fine. I just didn't want you to sit here all night and then not have the opportunity to speak.
I think that it is a really important tool where Durham is at, as Kristen said, in terms of your comprehensive planning process. And this town, under the comprehensive plan, basically has a town-wide zoning, as opposed to district zonings, where you would have those traditional places where larger projects and large-scale commercial and industrial would have an opportunity to go into, increase your tax base. So, you've been talking about doing an update to the comprehensive plan to look at that. But as Kristen said, I think from a development standpoint, you're years away from really being able to do it and use it effectively. So I think this is kind of an alternative to that. And you were thinking about, budgeting somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 to do a real comprehensive plan for growth in rural areas and the whole 9 yards. Basically what this does, and it just seems to potentially make a lot of sense, that here, rather than trying to plan out the entire community under very complicated analysis, can basically look at individual properties on that same approach to comprehensive planning and limit scope, limit the cost, and not have it, as Kristen said, try to write an ordinance that covers everything under the sun. So I think it's a really important tool. I think also Durham is in a position with some of the people that are available, your new town attorney support, my experience, I've negotiated for Falmouth and Gray special zoning districts that involved very large projects with infrastructure and tax increment financing. So it's amazing that you have an opportunity with some of the resources that are available to do this, because most small towns just can't even do it, even if they have the contract zoning, because they don't have the resources and the experience to deal with something like this. But Durham is in a position right now to be able to take advantage of it. So I think it's a very important tool.
Good point.
Thank you, George. It sounds like you're saying we're just a wicked smart town. We can figure it out.
Hey, yeah?
Yeah. Perfect. Any other questions?
Nice one.
Yeah, this is awesome. And I like ordinances that are only a few pages. It's easier to under.
Is there anything that has popped out with anybody as a wording change you'd like to see, or anything you'd like added or changed?
I don't see anything based off my review before tonight when we had it in our packet, or based off our discussion today. So does anyone else see anything?
I didn't see anything.
But I never check for periods, commas. That is Heather who checks for that.
Do your worst.
Yeah.
It's because I worked for a lawyer.
Yeah.
So I can't read anything without proofreading.
So I think that I'm comfortable with sending this to to the planning board to review. They got a presentation last week on the concept of contract zoning to just kind of be a primer, like what we had earlier tonight. I think sending this over as something that we're comfortable with for them to put it in their pipeline to start the public hearing process, to put it on as a warrant article on the town meeting. By me. So, does anyone?
The only thing that I would add to that is that I wanna make sure they know that if they need input from us about the direction, or that we just don't end up in that situation that we were in before where, we were thinking we had communicated one thing, they were thinking we had communicated something else, and it kind of was not going in the same direction.
Yeah, so my understanding of the process, all warrant article language needs to be presented in a public format by the planning board. And then it comes to the select board and we say, yep, we like this warrant language plus your public comment. We did it a little bit differently here because this is so major, just to say the select board's good with the basis document, so we're up to speed now. So now I think we can hand this to the planning board and say, go through your process and bring it to town public hearing, and then bring us the warrant language, but we know the nuts and bolts of it, rather than seeing it at the very end and saying, whoa, this is pretty major. So does that work if we just communicate to them that we just want them to take this and go with it on their normal process for review for a warrant article?
There's another piece to this that I think you at least need to touch on tonight. You don't necessarily need to resolve it, and that is, what will the trigger be for the scale of projects that have to go through this, solar as well as battery energy storage? So
Yeah.
again, you don't have to resolve that tonight, but I think it'd be important to communicate to the planning board. Are you looking for them to come up with those thresholds of the size of a battery energy storage system project or a solar farm that triggers this mechanism? Because the mechanism itself, I think, probably is going to be less of an issue for the planning board than.
But when to apply it?
When to apply it, yeah.
So do we want to have a conversation on that? Because I think that it should be for any battery energy storage system.
To me, I don't want to interrupt, but it's almost 8 o'clock. And we still have the budget to go through.
Yeah.
I understand it's something, but I don't think it's something that we need to decide right now. We can have them review and have further discussions if we want to decide that, or have them decide it.
I agree.
Yeah, and that was what I was just going to say, but at minimum include battery energy storage system in the contract zoning, and then have them go through the public process to get
Are you
feedback.
comfortable if they look at that issue and vet it?
Look at the issue of what to
What
include.
the threshold for size of projects?
Sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I would add to that is, now that you understand the process and the ordinance, it would make some sense to go back to the land use ordinance or the table of uses in it. And if there's anything in your individual minds that's this type of project, or perhaps this type of project at a certain scale, something where I would really prefer to see it go through contract zoning, we could certainly have that discussion
So,
Of an existing use?
of an existing use. Yeah.
so I
Joe
think,
just gravel pits.
yeah, me and my gravel pits. So I think what would be good is just if we do homework as a board and just put on the agenda for next week to any board member who wants to bring forward a topic to include as a contract zoning, and send that from the board, discuss that with the board and send that to the planning board. We'll do that at our next meeting, but it's going to require people to do homework and come prepared. So
we'll start with just the two.
yeah, and then maybe after next meeting, the planning board might hear from the select board and say, we want you to bring the following up as well. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Okay. Thank you for the time, Josh. I start rambling a little bit sometimes. So the next thing is the budget presentation.
Do you need a minute?
If we
Your
could-
mic is off.
If we could take 1 minute, I have to use the restroom before we get started, and I think this will be a few minutes of discussion, so. Josh, you got the chair while I'm done. You can adjourn, I guess.
Don't tell me.
During the meeting.
I feel like I always talk about
I that's all, right? I don't know how close you're gonna be to these things, you know.
How many do you need?
Two.
Just two?
I was just gonna say it's in here.
Those, we recycle. I can do that, just, the volume just changes.
Oh, yeah, well, maybe just for a little minute. while we're not in
All right, we'll
recess.
see, we'll see.
I know, I haven't started yet. And Mark. Thank you, Calvin, it's a long day for you.
Calvin, I don't know.
You know,
I was gonna give you a hard time, like he gives to me. I mean, they were out plowing, I don't know why it's so bad for me to clean the snow off my driveway.
I got a toothache, it's,
Oh,
I slept like 2 hours last night.
Oh, that's the worst.
And as soon as I can get in this tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I went in a week ago and told him it was hurting, and he said, well, it's not infected, so. Come back and it's just throbbing, just touch it.
It's awful, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I got,
Mark, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, no,
That's fine.
at least he's getting paid.
Maybe what's he gonna be doing otherwise?
Well, I would have been playing poker with some friends.
that's important. That's social.
But that's all right.
No, I wasn't invited.
Although I was just reading a humorous story. Somebody shoplifted at the Hannaford's on Spada Street.
No, just wearing a coat. I think people are cold.
Ran out of the store,
Yeah, I
ran
really
across
wouldn't
Highland
do that.
Springs, and got run over.
Because of the timing, we have to.
And he was pinned under the car. I guess he wasn't hurt, but he was pinned under the car.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Which, that makes me laugh.
Alrighty. Everyone back? Cool. Alright, yeah, we're gonna move now into our 2020 fiscal year 2026 budget presentation and start off here with the manager's budget presented to the board based off of the feedback we gave him a couple weeks ago. So.
All right, well, thank you. So first, let me just talk about the process of this budget that gets developed. So somewhere around the mid-October, I asked Chief Tripp and Road Commissioner Bohemia to look at their equipment schedules and their replacement schedules in the year to see if there's been any changes in those and get those to me, and then we get those to Mark. And then there's, as we move forward, Mark gives us the budget workbook that gets handed off to the fire chief and road commissioner, and they begin to put their budgets as I do for administration. And we have meetings together to discuss what these budget items look like as far as where are we with fuel, what's that cost, and things like that. So we meet several times leading up to today to put this budget together. And then once we have this budget together, we hand it off to Mark, and Mark Roy, I consider him as our finance director. He kind of puts it all together and sends it back to me, and we look at it, and this thing changes. Things change today in this budget, believe it or not. So it's always moving. It changed from Thursday when I sent it to you. So we've spent 2.5, 3 months on putting this budget together. So it's not just a one meeting and one and done and here we go. We put a lot of effort in this budget. This particular budget is unique in the sense that it's 18-month long. So some services and invoices will be paid in 1 year. Some get paid for the full 18 months, and some get is a 2-year. So for example, like Calvin Salt, he's gonna go through 2 winters, so there's 2 years worth of expenditures in that. The county budget only gets paid once in this budget. So there was a lot of work, a lot of phone calls to look at, okay, when is this getting paid, when does that get paid? And we put the budget together and we see what the numbers look like. So I'm gonna go over the summary page with you and we'll dive in, because this is, all the pages underneath that is what drives the summary page. So I just kind of want to give you an overview first of where we're at. Okay, so if you look at the first page, if you look up in the left-hand corner where it says funding requirements, that really is the municipal budget. We also have a county taxes and we have school budgets. So, but this is just the municipal portion of the budget.
It does include county tax and school estimates in the townwide.
Oh, in the townwide, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all there.
Right.
Okay, so when you look at it, you'll see that total spending in this budget is down 0.5%. Even though you see increases in general government, public safety, and spending is down 0.5%. And we'll look at those numbers that drives it. Okay, and we've annualized all of this too to help you understand that because it's an 18th month budget, we have a factor in there that takes into account an apples to apples comparison in the percent variance. All the budget numbers that you see in the 26th column is the cost of an 18th month budget. Okay? So once we fill in all this, we see what we get, and then what I do is it's like, okay, what do we want for a target tax levy? So what I use for a data point is the consumer price index for the Northeast, and that's at 3.5. So I say, okay, I'm gonna deliver a 3.5% increase. And what do we have to do to get there? You'll see the additions to fund balance. That's what drives that. So to get to the 3, even though we're 0.5% less in spending, to get there, I use 590,000 in fund balance. Annualized is 393. Last year we used 668, so it's gone down significantly. But to get to that 3.5, that's what we got to use in fund balance.
And just to clarify, when you say your target there being the 3.5%, because that's the consumer price index, that's because we indicated to you we wanted a budget that provides flat funding, same level of services, and with the consumer price index being up by that percentage, that's a good way to target it.
Yeah, it's a data point that is pulled from a good resource, and it's just not like what I feel. It's like the consumer price index is really the price of goods and services over last year. So it just sort of keeps up with the inflation, if you will. So.
Jerry, can I pause for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Do you want us to ask questions as you go, or let you get?
Sure, no, you can, no, go ahead and ask as you go.
So, where we budgeted 668,000 for 2024 out of the fund balance, but then it says the actual is 394, that's a huge difference, so
Yep.
can you just explain why?
Yeah, that's because of the unexpended money that we didn't spend and revenues
Okay.
combined go
Increased
back in,
revenues.
so it reduces that
Okay.
amount.
Thank you.
And we'll see that on the last page of the budget. Okay? Really where that is. So as presented, you're looking at a mill rate increase of annualized at 22.52. But over 18 months, it's 33.78, but you really got to annualize it to really get the apples to apples.
Can you say that number again?
Yeah, it's right at the bottom of your sheet. It's 22.52.
Do they have the
Yeah,
numbers? Do they have the notes?
they don't.
Okay.
No.
Oh,
Yeah, so
they
it's
do.
it doesn't say on here the notes that it doesn't annualize it, but it's a 1.7% increase to the
Right.
annual mill rate.
As presented. Now this, keep in mind, this is estimated, so when the assessor does her commitment, valuation's probably gonna go up because we've got more housing, that's gonna end up going down. We don't know how much until the commitment is done.
It's also contingent upon what the school
Budget
approves
is,
for
yeah.
their budget as well as what the county taxes are, because these are included in here in
Yeah.
order to arrive at rough estimates, but these are rough estimates.
Right. Okay. Any questions on the first page? All right. You'll also see in this budget that we provided more data for you to kind of like just break down the budget a little bit. And you could, so what we did was we categorized the expenditures into wages and benefits, and then you've got fixed cost, and really where you've got your discretionary cost. And that's all listed on your second page. But to talk about this further, if you go to page 3, that's where we can look at this. So when you break down your benefits, and the wages and benefit is assuming a 3.5% increase in wages as it's presented here. So if you look at that, and it's either 100% of the budget, or you can look at it as every dollar that passes through that town office. 13.4 cents goes to wages and benefits. Okay? 74.8 cents goes to fixed costs. That's your education, that's your debt service, the stuff that you really can't touch there, you're gonna pay those regardless. And then the variable and discretionary costs, we broke down 11.7% or 11.7 cents of every dollar is discretionary, where you've got some wiggle room.
That includes the road maintenance, so which isn't really.
It isn't, but you can touch it. And speaking of road maintenance.
Which we've done before, it didn't work out so well.
And speaking of road maintenance, because I think this is important, the next 2 roads, well, next year we're gonna do Auburn Pownell Road. And the year after that is Stackpole Road. So if there's any, I mean, that's a big ticket. So if you wanna defer maintenance to cut the budget, that would be the place to do it, because that's where your biggest piece of the pie is. So I just give that to you. But if you don't want to touch it, and I would recommend that you don't, if you leave all that in there, plus you transfer to reserves, we'll talk about that later, that's your funding the capital. That's at 3.5 cents. The rest of it, you're really talking about, 3 cents of discretionary money that you got of every dollar that you have wiggle room to do. So I just throw it in that way just to kind of give you a different perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
When we're talking about road maintenance in Auburn Pownell and Stackpole, will they be done with the work that they're doing to the corridor over there? Because
So if they're done, yes. If they're not, no, we'll have to switch. But Calvin can speak to it. Auburn Pownell's next, correct? Calvin?
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
They're telling me they think they'll be out there in March, hopefully, so that's,
And then Stackpole's
Just in time for mud
next.
season.
I'm wondering if some of those timber mats may still be frozen in there, so I wouldn't say before May. I think it would be, but we'll be paving after that anyway, so.
Okay? And then again, in this particular budget, I gave you some nice graphs to look at to kind of show you.
I mean, what I'm seeing here is there's not a lot of wiggle room for discretionary spending.
No,
All but 11.7% of the budget is fixed.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like Josh said, even 5% of it's roads, so if we consider road maintenance discretionary.
Yeah, and the other part is the reserves, which to me, by putting money in the reserves, we're saving all that interest. And collecting interest on what's in the reserves, right?
Right.
So we're making money and saving money at the end.
Right,
To me,
exactly.
that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, just some visual graphs to show you. Some people like those. They can pick that stuff up a little easier. All right, so if you go to page 6, we'll just talk about revenues for a second, because we do estimate those. We did last year a little bit. It was, I think, one of the first years, if not the first year, I think the town started to, because if you don't estimate your revenues, you're asking the residents to pick up that tab. So you don't want to do that.
Which is how that fund balance built up over the years.
It was, it certainly contributed.
So can we just talk about that for a quick second, because that was one of my major points
Mhm.
about this, is that for a long time, we didn't estimate, right, until last year. We
Right.
weren't estimating revenues, and that's how that fund balance grew to the point that it's at. And now we are estimating revenues, and we're pulling out of that. And so if that input isn't happening at the level that it was, because we're now estimating revenues and we're pulling money out of that to use, I just think that that's something that we need to be mindful of, and I wanna get through this more, but then see, which we talked about on the 668 and the 3, that we're not pulling and there isn't anything going back in, because now we're doing a better job estimating revenues. Does that make sense what I'm trying to
Yeah,
communicate?
correct. I mean, obviously, so one of the major focuses of towns is their fund balance and having a good idea of where your fund balance is and what you're actually adding or taking away from fund balance from one year to the next helps you to make decisions about the budget about, okay, well, how much are we going to add or take back from it? So over time, as you continue to do this in a comparative manner, right? That's the same way every year. You're going to have much more control over where your fund balance is. It's not precise, right? Because, like, for example, you'll estimate revenues and you'll come in over estimates for revenues. You'll budget expenditures, you'll come in under budget for expenditures. So that has a variance on what your ultimate fund balance will be, but it still is much better than not estimating anything over
Right.
revenues. So yeah, that's one of the big considerations at the end, which is why we include the fund balance sheet at the end, so you can see where we're at as of December 31st.
Okay. Thank you.
So just a couple things to point out about the revenues. It's really, I mean, you can see what we estimated and where we were, but if you look at intergovernmental, you're seeing a lot of negative percentages there with the intergovernmental revenues. Do you see that? The reason for that is because we're only getting 1 year's worth of revenue in an 18th-month budget. That's why it's negative. So we have to consider that. So in intergovernmental, that's why revenue was down 17%, is because we're only getting one year's worth in an 18th-month budget.
Everyone follow that?
Does it have to do with the timing?
Yeah,
It does.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's just a glitch for now, and then,
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
then when we're on.
like some things we're only paying once in that 18 months, some things we're only collecting once in that 18 month.
Right.
And the expectation by going to the 18-month budget is not necessarily the funding, but the expenses, and will be easier to estimate. And, what the revenue sharing will be, we'll have a better idea when we do the budget.
Yeah,
for the fiscal year.
mostly
That's-
revenue sharing, right? And revenue sharing, you can see here, for example, FY '23's actual was $740,000 for that 12-month period. And then for FY '24, it was 680. One of the reasons why it dropped so much is because we lost out on revenue sharing number 2, which is based off of your valuation and your mill rate, number of people. And so we exceeded the average for the state, and so you disqualified for revenue sharing 2. It's not really much you can do about that, but going into this coming
We know we
18-month
won't get that, yeah.
budget, we simply said, all right, well, let's budget a little bit conservatively. This is a place where you could play with it. You could increase it if you wanted to, the budget. But I wouldn't go all hog wild, because it's also determined upon not just whether you get both revenue sharing 1 and revenue sharing 2, but it's also upon estimating out 18 months of economic
Development, yeah.
development. We don't have the benefit even right now, when you're a calendar year town, you don't have the benefit of the state economists' forecasts, which come out. The preliminary forecasts come out usually around February, March timeframe, and then their final forecasts come out usually in May, June timeframe, right? We don't even have the benefit of that as a calendar year town, because they come out after we're done putting together the budget. So yes, changing to an 18-month budget helps to
It gets us online with everyone else.
fine tune that estimate
Yeah.
in future years.
Can I just point something out? So I'm looking at planning board fees and code enforcement fees, and $3,000 is what was budgeted, and the actual was $10,671. Obviously, that's a direct result of our fee schedule change.
It helps.
So then I'm surprised by the next line where our budget for code enforcement fees was 45,000 and the actual's 43, because a lot of, how would code enforcement fee, isn't that like permits? So I'm surprised that that number's down, because we did raise the price of all of our permitting.
It's just dependent on volume of permits.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, you don't have people asking as much for permit, needing as much more permits.
I find that surprises me a
Yeah.
lot.
I see what you're saying. You're saying that if we increased it,
Yeah.
how did the volume of permits drop by a factor so large
Well,
that even with the increase,
The
it
volume itself, or the actuals didn't drop. The actual from FY '23 was 41,000. The actual for FY '24 was 43,000. So you did have an increase. It's just we budgeted 45,000 for FY '24, and we just didn't achieve that.
Yeah,
mark.
we just doubled our permit fees in like May, so I'm just surprised that
Yeah.
that number's that number.
Yeah, I don't know.
I was thinking I was getting a win there.
But again, any of the revenue estimates you can fiddle with, right?
Yeah,
But because the goal obviously is to try to have not a precise estimate of where you're going to end up at year end, but
Right.
at least to have closer than what you had in the past.
yeah, okay.
Realistic.
Yeah, right.
So if you don't have any other questions with revenues, I just wanted to point out the negatives and why that was,
I want to point out the positives here.
okay?
This it's really nice to see the we adjusted the fee schedule. Wow, fee schedule on the planning board fees, and that's bringing us up 244%. And so I think one of the big goals we had this year was figuring out other ways to generate revenue, and this is showing that we're doing that. So that's nice to see.
Yeah,
Where's your interest one on the revenue,
It's
is that?
next
The next
page.
page.
Next
Okay,
page,
okay,
yeah.
because that's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, interest you can actually, I mean, 'cause with interest, we don't know what the interest rates are going to be. Just like we don't know what the economy is going to be. That's why revenue sharing is, because revenue sharing is based off of sales tax, right? That the state collects. So if as the economy goes down and people stop buying, you have lesser projections. Same with interest. I don't know where the interest rates are going to be. So we received $112,000 in interest on our deposits in 2024 compared to 28,000 in 2023.
Which is huge.
It is reasonable to expect that we will actually have, over the course of 18 months, more than $100,000. So that's another area where if you wanted to fiddle with the budget as far as revenue sources, my suggestion is be a little bit conservative, because who knows what's going to happen with interest rate. But you could probably get more
Jerry-
than 120, I would imagine.
With the move that you made from one bank to the other, did they give you any lock in that interest rate for any set period of time, or is it variable monthly?
Yeah, the CDARs, so we did two 1.5 million, and they were locked in at around 5% for
Right.
3 months.
For 3 months, yeah.
One for 3 months, one for 6.
Okay. So that'll probably go down based off of what I've seen for interest rates changing slightly.
Well, you're
you know.
locked in.
After, and I'm
Oh,
saying
after.
after
Oh,
that.
okay, right.
But, so my discussion point here would be, while I think we can expect more than $100,000 in revenue from the interest rate, I think it's good to budget conservatively there. Because even though it's over an extra 6 months, I'd rather for us to budget at 100,000 and then be looking at, 130,000 in revenue as opposed to the other way around. So,
Yep.
I have a question. So I don't remember when Casella was switching us over to the automated bins.
Yeah.
And so,
I can tell you.
okay,
So the target date is July 2026.
which is the
Start of the new,
of this.
No.
The end, the end.
The start of the
Okay,
first,
okay.
next budget, yeah.
Got it, okay, my question is answered. Thank you.
yep. Okay, so that does the revenue side of that. Not a whole lot to,
I
yeah.
think I have another question. The goal to collect back taxes, any of that, is that built in?
No,
None of that?
no.
And it wouldn't have any effect on revenue anyway. So those are all receivables, right? Basically, the revenue has been recognized. If there's any collections on it, then it'll just reduce the receivable. There's no additional revenue.
All right. Your pages didn't get numbered, I'm sorry, so we'll just,
These pages are not.
Yeah, this is
oh,
fine.
yours is? Mine weren't.
The ones with the notes on.
Oh, okay. All right, good, then they're numbered. So, page 8 then, just kind of sums up the whole budget again. I think there's a ton to see there. You know, administration is up 13, assessing, I mean, this just kind of goes down through the whole list.
By department.
Yeah, so general government is up 13%, public safety's up 13%, public works is up 2.9%,
Is that the annualized number?
yeah.
Yeah, or normalized, right?
And we'll look at the numbers, what's driving that, when we get into it.
So in this, from, again, the pages 8 and 9 are really for, to aggregate the data, so that you can see, you're not getting into the weeds of it. The townwide, comparison on a normalized basis, meaning apples to apples, the budget is down 3.2, and that's what's really driving a lot of the ability to stay flat in total expenditures, right? Your total expenditures are minus 0.5% reduction from budget to budget. Most of that is because of the fact that you're only going to pay one county tax bill during that 18-month period, and debt service payments are really just going to be one payment during that 18-month time frame as well.
But the takeaway message here is our municipal budget, just our townwide municipal budget's down 3%.
Correct. Yep.
Right, so,
How,
Or
that's,
0.5%.
yeah, sorry, 0.5%,
Yeah.
yeah.
so if we're only paying those bills one time in an 18-month budget, what does that do to the next budget cycle?
It doesn't do anything.
We only pay it once, yeah.
County tax gets paid in September.
Okay,
So in what would normally be a 12-month, you'll pay September's county tax bill. But now because the fiscal year is going to go all the way to June of 2026, well, it's not paid until September of 2026. Then once you go to a 12-month budget again for FY27, it's only going to be one, right?
Okay, I was
Yep.
starting to worry a little.
Well, no,
but-
no, no, it's not like we're gonna have to,
Yeah,
the 12-month period's not gonna double us up. There are things in this budget that will double up on, but once we get to the next budget,
It'll
it's
just be a normal
It'll just be
budget.
normal.
just hitting singles after that.
okay, thank you.
And, you know, and the public works paving, that's only getting hit once, and that's a $400,000 bill. So that's only getting paid once, because we can pave after July in 2026,
Yeah.
so.
But before we go forward, I just want to acknowledge again, like, this is really good to see our municipal budget, because of our increase in revenues and then the way it's all laying out, to be down 0.5%. Like, that's something to be celebrated right there. So, nice work.
So now we can get into the individual departments, if you'd like, and kind of look at that. And I'm just gonna touch on the increases, and why they're increasing. So when you look at the first two, the second line, 2070-15 in wages, and then 2070-20, the part-time wages, if you look at the full-time wages, it looks like it's a 56.2% increase, but it's really not. You have to we don't have any part-time help anymore. So you gotta take that, and that got added, right, Mark, to the
Correct.
full-time wages. So when you do that, it's really a 5.3% increase. Okay?
Right. If you were to compare the $93,000 and $45,000 budget for FY '24 to the $217,950 18-month budget for FY '26, the variance, the normalized variance between those two is 5.3%.
So there's no added staff in this, in these wages. I'll show you where we added some help later in the budget. So the next big real increase, if you go down, is really health insurance. So our health insurance is up 9%. And we had an employee add family health, and we had another employee add their child to dental insurance.
Sorry, can you give me that line number?
Yeah, I can. It's 207055. So health insurance is up 9%. We added an employee to a family plan, and another employee added a child to the dental plan. So that's driving that.
Can you
Okay.
just explain why the number says 186%?
Because
Is that-
a family plan is like $27,000.
It's almost 30 now.
Is how much,
So
is how much the,
So you're saying that the health insurance has increased in price, and additionally, more people are claiming?
that's
right.
right. The premiums
That's
increased
exactly
by
right.
9%.
Yeah.
And then they're likely to increase.
Yeah.
We didn't budget an increase for because health insurance premiums are done on a calendar year basis. So we didn't add in an additional amount for the 6 months from January 1st, 2026 through June. We just simply added 1.5 times. So they could actually come in a little bit higher, but I figured that, well, the difference wasn't that big. It was maybe another 15,000, I think, total. Not even that, right?
Yeah.
I don't even think it was that, maybe 10,000 total. So just left it as is with the calculation. But it might actually be higher. Plus, we don't know what else people are gonna select when open
Yeah.
enrollment comes in 2026 anyway.
Can you clarify, that town employees contribute anything to that?
It's 80 town, 20% employee. Yeah.
For health and dental.
For health, and yeah.
And then they pay for their own vision and income protection and
Yeah.
supplemental life.
Does the payroll tax line reflect the new adjustment?
It does, yep. And it reflects the town paying the full 1%. And, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So the next, in the 62% retirement, that's just driven through the wages.
Right.
And how much we can do with that.
Again, that's because of the additional employees.
Right.
So if you're a full-time employee, you're required to join Maine PERS for Town of Durham, because they don't have an agreement with Social Security Administration. So all new employees have to join, all new full-time employees have to join, and as a result, you're gonna have a huge increase.
And just to clarify, by additional employees, you mean the part-timers moving into a full-time capacity, so,
Correct.
yeah.
Which is why they weren't on Maine PERS before.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, 27222, business services.
Legal, did you want?
Oh, yeah, I gotta touch legal, sorry, yeah, I was there. So yes, 207220 legal. So we were, in the years past, we'd budget 10,000 and wouldn't use our legal services that much. But we're now using them more. And so to get them on a monthly retainer, it's $12.50 a month for 18 months, and that's the 22.5 that you see, which I would really recommend, because I think we're gonna need the attorney
Yes,
much more than we were.
and so to
using
clarify,
before.
the retainer is at that price, we have access to our attorney for as much or as little time in the month, and we're not
Yep,
invoiced per.
exactly.
conversation per visit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this helps everybody, codes, if they, a question, just call up, and, I mean, this is a really good
Yeah, that
thing
seems,
to go, so.
if we think about how much more we've seen this attorney versus the previous attorney, I think that makes sense to
And there's a
move
lot
to a
on our
retainer.
plate too, we're
Yeah.
gonna need her. Okay, so we got that, let me go down here. So business services, line 27222. So that's an increased, so that's typically what Mark does for us. You can see that it's 65 now, so in an 18th month budget, that would be 45. But I added another 20,000 for an HR consultant to get us up to compliance, because right now our HR is not in compliance, so, she's a professional. And so when we think about the 4 employees that we had before, this line makes up for that 4th employee because it's Mark and the human resources person, so we're still, that's.
So that addresses the administrative
Yeah.
concerns we had when we
I
initiated
believe
this
so, yes.
conversation?
Yeah, a lot of towns, that have these smaller budgets, it's a much more cost productive to hire these professionals to do it, because they're so much quicker and faster at it.
Plus, you don't have any payroll costs.
Right, you don't have any
costs.
Well,
Right.
especially if it's a discrete and measurable task that just needs to be
Right.
completed and then wrapped
They
up.
get it done, wrapped up, and it's accurate, and,
Yeah.
I mean, having Mark on the team is a
We also like you, Mark.
huge,
Thanks, Sean.
huge asset.
So I
Not
just
just
wanna,
your-
I wanna say 2 things around this. I think Mark is a perfect example of why this works and works phenomenally well.
Yes.
I also think that it's important to point out that when we gave you direction, at least to me, the perception was that we were saying, we're supporting you hiring another full-time person. And
Yeah.
instead of doing that, which could have cost, like if they took the family plan and whatever the salary would be and that sort of thing, you've come back to us, for $20,000
Yeah.
to cover what you need to be able to bring the HR up to compliance and the administrative issues that we
Yeah.
agreed exist.
Yeah.
And instead of that potentially
Yeah.
$80,000 a year
Yeah.
bill.
Right.
So I appreciate this coming at us this way instead. Thank you for
Yes.
doing
I definitely
that
appreciate
work.
that initiative, because when we give you the green light to hire somebody new, and you come back and say, I found a better deal, that's awesome cost savings right there.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Also, the professionalism is something that you really do need to consider, right? I mean,
Right.
towns try to do their own HR, they try to do their own accounting. Those things may seem like they're easy or easy enough to do, but finding somebody who is qualified to do that, that's willing to do it at, a price that, a wage that small towns are willing to pay. Nobody says, oh, well, why don't we hire our own, small town attorney and pay him $30,000 a year to do legal stuff. We're a small town, we don't need much legal. Nobody does that, right? For towns to start thinking about, look, accounting is a profession,
Yes.
HR is a profession.
Yes.
These are things where you really need skill if you
Skilled
really want to do it well. And it's cheaper, I think, obviously, as we've talked about.
Much more
Yeah.
cost effective.
Yeah.
And, hiring is like a box of chocolates, right? You really don't know what you're gonna get, when you-
The other part of it too is that if you hire and the person leaves, the institutional knowledge leaves with them.
Right.
And so this way it stays. And the other part that I appreciate is the long game, right? Like, this is accomplishing this goal for $20,000 and not adding an employee to the town staff.
Right.
For year over year going forward.
Right.
So I think this was a great hearing.
Yeah, and both professionals do training. I mean, Mark has trained me, he's helped Jessica. This HR person's gonna do the same thing for all staff, so it's definitely a better way forward. Okay. All right.
Is this a position you see going long-term, or is this something to get
So-
on? Because I know you've talked about wanting that better HR services. Is it long-term, short-term, don't know yet?
So it would be long-term, but not that costly. There's gonna be a lot of heavy lifting for her at first to get us to compliance, because you get in trouble in HR stuff really in a hurry.
Yeah.
So if you're not in compliance, that's the main thing. So part of a manager's job and part of the department head's job, all of it is to protect the town from liability. So that's why it's really important to get this person on board. So she'll probably spend this down, half of it, in probably the 3 or 4 months to get its compliance. And then she's just on an on-call basis. If there's something heavy that I need to get her involved with, maybe we don't have a union here, but for an example, if there was a grievance, I would call her to handle it. If there's something like that, I would call them. We will still do in-house, like the onboarding package and the payroll and all that stuff. They'll just be there to, if we get in some sort of trouble or something, they'll be
Well,
there
I just
to walk
think-
us through that. And that's what we need, that professionalism there.
And I think in this, especially with HR stuff, like a penny in prevention saves you $1 in expenses in the future.
Absolutely.
And you don't necessarily, if you never have to cash out on that investment, you're in good position, you know, like,
So,
because you've got that in place that protects us. And I think we need to always think about limiting liability here, so.
yeah, so like in the first few months, she'll go through all the employees' files to make sure they're up, because you're supposed to separate medical from other stuff, and I don't think that's done. She's gonna go through the employee handbook and update that. She's gonna look at job descriptions. She's gonna really help out to get us to a good point where.
Wage table's gonna be.
Wage
one
table's
thing.
gonna help with that.
And this is all those time suck things that take a lot of time,
Right,
but when you get distracted. you
Huge
can't-
opportunity
You can't do
cost.
it.
right. So, and then like I said, after that, it's just an on-call thing. She does this for a lot of town. I know she does it for York and Wells, and she told me the other day, she says, there's been one town I haven't heard from for 6 months because nothing's really come up. And I suspect that's gonna be sort of our case. We don't really have a lot of issues. The issue is we're just not in compliance now, and we can get dinged for it. But we got nobody to get us out of compliance, so so it's kind of an open-ended contract, and
Really
she's on
awesome
call
work.
when you need her. It's perfect. It's just sort of like Mark.
Yeah.
It's exactly like Mark, just in the human resources.
This is
So,
awesome,
good, so I
Sarah, thank you.
appreciate that, yeah. Let's see, as we go down, there really isn't a whole lot more increases other than,
Postage and freight.
yeah, postage and freight, that's a big one, isn't it? So, postage is up, you can see where we budgeted for 1,500, but we're leaning more, that's part of it. It's $250 a month just for normal postage to send our B&B reports. We're sending more notices out to our butters. So that's the reason for that.
Yep.
And the 2 tax bills.
And the 2 tax bills, thank you, yeah, the 2 tax bills is included in that, so we're doing that now, so that's up.
So postage is up in terms of its unit cost, but also in the amount
Volume.
that we do.
It's volume, yeah. Those are subscriptions that, that's 1.1%, but that's because some of those are due at different times, and I think we're gonna be okay. I think I looked at that. I didn't really write a note in there for who was getting paid when, but I think we're good. Miscellaneous expenses, that's the big one. The percent, and the reason is we had an employee that was paying into Social Security, and we don't pay into Social Security, so now we owe main payers money, $4,300, so $4,300 is coming right off the top of that. And then we're right back to where we was before, so I just put that in miscellaneous.
Yeah, it's a big percentage increase, but it's not a huge amount.
And that goes to my, sort of that point of HR, that's why.
That would have been prevented if we had that
Correct.
HR consultant.
To help and kind of guide, exactly. So with all that, the total administration, so wages and benefits, I think is driving a lot of that, but it's 13.4%. When health insurance goes up.
Well, you say wages and benefits, but there's also increased volume on other things.
There is, it's
And
a combination,
on-
yeah.
In that, well, I think of that 20,000 investment in HR as something that's gonna return dividends to
Yeah.
multiple magnitudes.
It could save you a lot of money in the long run, actually.
Yeah.
Okay? Any questions with the general government that you?
No.
Okay?
And just for a process thing, I was thinking we would go through and have all these questions, and then after we've got all our questions out of the way, we can then, as a board, just go through and vote on approval of what we see, section by section. And if anyone wants to make any changes, then we can discuss that, so.
So on assessing is down 4.4%. There's really not a lot of change. You can see that we just didn't increase anything, like in general supplies, they didn't really spend much in last year, so it's small money, it's $250, so we just kept it the same. So it's a pretty small budget, and it's down. If you have questions about it,
I just have questions about the mapping. I thought we had to pay an annual fee for mapping because we went to GIS.
yeah, and we just haven't got that bill yet.
Okay.
So that's why they're still there.
Okay.
Do you know when that bill comes in, Jerry?
I gotta give them a call. George and.
We know that amount.
Oh, do I? No, I don't know. I don't know exactly what that amount
Yeah.
is.
Okay, no worries. What's that?
All right. Moving on to information technology. You let me know if you're ready.
Yep.
Okay, this is a big one here, that went up a little bit, and we can explain why. So, IT services. So you were all involved with that. We've got managed IT services, and our current provider dropped us. We had to go out to bid. We picked one, and that's the cost of the new service. So which is a good thing, because we were pretty wide open with our.
Again, mitigating liability.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, it was a little scary.
I mean, when the IT consultant says, someone has been in your system, they've just decided they didn't want to do anything with it, that's,
Oh, yeah? Really?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he said based off of our security levels, he had no doubt that if someone wanted to be in there, they could be, you
Yeah.
know?
Another one is that's gone up is the website, but that's because we have Text My Gov, we're doing text notifications, so that kind of drove that. And that's one where we're paying twice in this budget.
And that's $8,000?
It's $4,000 a year,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and we pay it in January, so we just paid it this January.
Right, but
pay
when
it
you
next
say, when you
January.
say gone up, it's like, we're budgeting $10,000 and one of that, 8,000 of that is just the text
Right,
gov being
right.
billed twice.
And the website's only $2,100 this year, and next year we don't pay anything for the website. That's a pay 2 years and you get the third one free.
Do we have a percent participation rate in the text.gov?
I can ask Kim, she might know. The last I knew, we were up 950
950 people.
people that were getting notifications.
It's good, but there's a whole lot.
Yeah,
And I mean, part of that could be one person in a household, you know, using it.
Yeah, like I have it, Chris is definitely not getting it.
I have it, my wife, I don't think has it, I just tell her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just mean per family, households,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah, we have
It's
like
about
2,000,
half,
we have
yeah.
about 2,000 households, so
It's not, I mean, that's.
2,200.
yeah.
But it'd
And
be
we
nice
have
to
a-
see those numbers get up so we can do some more outreach there.
We have a contract for 2 years, and if we decide it wasn't worth it or it's not working, we can revisit it then. But
I would like to say I like that, I like it. I
Me
like the
too.
service, I
Yeah.
like the messages we've seen so far.
Oh, good.
It's
I text
really
back, but no
smoothly-
one responds.
Oh, really?
I say, hey chief, and nothing.
I think a conversation that we have to have around information technology is our telecom reserve. 'Cause
Yeah.
there's all kinds of money in there. And I'm not really, I think Mark explained it to me, what the town was doing was they were taking their franchise fees and putting them in a reserve, and then they were using those fees to pay for telecom or,
Well, what used to be the IT department.
right,
But that doesn't really make much sense to do that.
right. So we should talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay? Planning and code enforcement?
I have a question about the software license.
Yeah,
So I know that we switched.
yeah,
from
okay, yeah,
Trio
that's
to
good, I'm
the-
glad you did.
And
I thought that it was and I could be remembering this wrong, I thought it was $15,000 a year.
Yep. So they're not ready.
Okay,
So that 25,231, well, you don't see it. So 25,231 is the trio, maintenance cost.
okay,
So what I've done there is I'm working with them to do 6 months of payments. All right, so we're gonna pay 6 months of that, and hopefully by the time July gets around, our new software will be ready to go. And Donna doesn't wanna be in transition when she does this 18th month budget either. So we're gonna have to run in tandem a little bit while we transition.
okay.
So in other words, this line reflects 6 months of our old software
This-
cost and
the-
then moving into the new software.
That's actually a year's worth.
Okay,
And then you got 10 for Town Cloud. So if we pay 6 month, Town Cloud is up, half of that 25 we won't pay, because it's a year. So I'm kind of managing.
so we
that as
budgeted for a
go.
year of Trio
Right,
with the hopes that Town Cloud will be ready within 6 months and then we don't have to pay
Pay-
for that Trio. But it's
Exactly.
better to budget for it and not
Exactly.
need it, okay.
right.
And
like I
when we
s-
pay that Town Cloud bill, does that represent a full year at 10,000?
Yes.
Okay,
And most towns that are jumping on with them are July 1st towns, so I think they have that in their mind, that they definitely want to be ready by then.
Okay.
Because they've taken on other towns, so. Being a calendar year, we're a little bit of an oddity, but we're changing that, so that's good. So with the new IT services and the Text My Gov, we're up 50% in that category. Okay. All right, planning and code enforcement. There's not a lot to see there. They're up 3.8%.
I just wanna go back to that for a second and say
Yeah.
out loud for all the residents to hear, that we entered into a contract. I just wanna make sure that's really clear. Like,
Yeah.
that's not a negotiable number, we entered into a contract for IT services, and
Right.
that's a fixed cost. I just wanna make sure that's really clear to
Yep.
people, that is really driving that 50% number.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Much better services. Everybody's protected too.
and that 50% number is also driven by if we need to pay for the more expensive one for a year. So if we only need that in Trio's 25,000 a year. So
Yeah.
if that drops off at 6 months, we save $12,100 because we don't have to pay that full 25,000. So when we look at that 51% starts going down.
Right. Okay. Moving on to planning and codes.
Maybe while Jerry takes a drink, we should make a motion to extend the meeting, cause it's 8:32.
Yeah. All right, you can make that motion.
I'd like to move, well, I don't know, because I don't know how long we should do. We're on page 12, and we have 19, we have 20, we have 8 more pages.
You want to extend until 9:30?
I think we definitely have to extend to 9:30.
All right.
I'd make a motion to extend our meeting until 9:30.
All right. Any questions on the motion? All right, all in favor? Any opposition? Seeing none? Extended.
I think you did that in the wrong order, but it's okay.
I said all in favor, any opposition?
Oh, I said any questions. Okay, go.
Okay, so planning and code enforcement, they're up 3.8%. There's really not a lot there to see. Most of their lines are down. If you have any questions regarding that, I'm happy to answer.
One second.
I don't know about those, I don't get the wages, but, okay. Are there not as many planning board members that didn't have as many meetings? I thought they,
Oh, you mean for the 1,100?
yeah,
It's because there was a $5,000 grant that the town had received for, I can't remember that. what
It was
for.
for the
Yeah.
AD.
Doing some codes, but
Yes.
we allocated, I think, about $2,000, $1,500 to it. So that's why the actuals is down for
Okay.
this year.
So we got a grant, save some money.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's only a one-time thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but still,
I s-
I like saving money.
Yeah, I think it's important though, like I pointed this out last time, that I don't think that Jerry does a great job of highlighting where your wins are, right? And so when we receive a grant, like I asked for, I'm not asking you for that tonight, but I think it's important to say, these are the grants that we applied for, these are what we won, and this is how much money we saved on the budget because of the grant work that you did, and that's one of those places, like if I hadn't asked that question, we wouldn't have known that.
Yep.
So,
Share your wins, Jerry.
yeah, well, and make a note of it, because when you do your stuff at the end of the year, you write your letter, like, I think that's something to include, I think it's something the town should know. Right, you are doing that work on our behalf to get those grant dollars, which is helping.
And the way I think about grants is, grants from other state, federal agencies, those are taxes people have already paid in town, and you're just helping us bring more of our tax money back to our local municipality, which I like.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, so that
Wraps up.
total general government. All right, on to the fire department. So line 307020, which is part-time wages, you're seeing an increase in that because that includes 3 months of night coverage that wasn't included in last year's bill because it didn't start until April. Okay, and there's 10% call volume too, and chief, speak up at any time if I misspeak or not saying things correctly. You all set on that?
And you said it's a 10% increase in call volume?
Currently, after running the numbers again, because it changes daily.
Yeah.
We were up 12% for the year totality, so that was 50 extra. And again, that drives, roughly I average 4 per call, so that's a couple hundred hours, but that's payroll and of course fuel and wear and tear. And that really still does wages, payroll taxes, workers' comp, the more you pay out, everything goes up. The other thing with an 18-month budget, and I have what we've been up 28% in call volume since I started, three and a half years. So I'm trying to figure out, last year was 7.4, this is 12.1. What's next year gonna be? We just continue to go. And then 18-month, right? So what's the next 6 months on top of that? You have to build in some type of protection for wages.
So not only is our percentage up, the rate that the percentage increases from the previous year is up,
They're related.
but building off of that previous year too.
This starting January 1st, minimum wage went up 50 cents, so half the fire department got a 50-cent raise for the next year, but that number's not fixed for the next 6 of the budget. So I don't know what that'll be. That could be $1, could be 50 cents, more or less. Half the department is based on minimum wage. If you don't have an EMS license, we're running about 42 on the roster. If you don't have an EMS license, you're based on minimum wage, which currently is $14.65. But, so I do a totality of how many of those, how many hours they've done, and average that out. And that adds up to thousands.
Is next year's minimum wage adjustment just a cost of living percentage, or is there another fixed increment to increase?
So Maine stopped at the 25 year. They had like a 3-year plan, so they just went up 50 cents January 1st, but there's nothing documented for 26. So for our budget, that next 6 months, there's nothing documented of the increase.
Yep.
If it were to be $1, that would be hundreds of hours actually per employee times roughly 14, 15 employees. So that adds up to thousands very quickly. The increased call volume, again, the payroll tax, workers' comp, all that. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Just kind of one note more like a talking point. So the chief doesn't take health insurance, but he gets that $1,200, and then there's Aflac. That's what that $3,750 adds up to, right, chief?
Yes.
Yeah. So, which if he decides to take it and we don't budget for it, we're gonna. That could be an issue, but I think there's a way we can work with that. you know, in case another employee that doesn't have, because we have a few that don't take it. I think there's like three or four that don't take health insurance, and if they decide to take it and we don't budget for it, we're gonna have to have a conversation, okay?
And generally, we would know that during the open enrollment period, unless they had a life event that changed their
Right.
ability to enroll.
Yeah. So speaking of that, if you look at 30/7100, I'm proposing to give the chief a stipend of $5,200 a year, because when I sign his timesheet, and he's constantly working 48 hours, 50 hours, 46 hours, and when he can't get coverage at night, he goes on the call, and when call volume's up and he continues to work, I would really like to retain him and kind of offer him something, and he wears like 3 hats. He does the fire chief, he's the EMS, and he's the emergency director. So when we have emergencies, so I'm proposing that we do that for him. And again, he doesn't take health insurance. So if he was to get paid his, even just straight time, with the hours he puts in, we'd be paying him $300 and $400. If he was to be eligible for overtime, which he's not, because he's salaried, it'd even be more. So $100 a week is minimum when you add that up.
So that establishes a stipend for being the EMS director and emergency director.
And the emergency management director, yes.
And so, in theory, if someone were to we were to ever add that position and break up EMS and fire, that would go
right
to whomever has that role. So it's a stipend that is for a duty, but if someone else were to be in that duty, it would shift.
Right.
Okay.
And, you know, we really want to try to retain our employees, because our good employees sometimes get sought after, and they'll come after them. So we need to think about that sort of stuff, so.
I just want to say one thing. I don't think that it's necessary to have the caveat be that he doesn't take health insurance. I think it's fine to say that you want to do this because it's in the best interest of the town to offer that stipend. Like the second part of your sentence, I think that the work that chief does is worth the stipend, regardless of what his health insurance plan is. I don't think, I get what you're doing there, and I can appreciate that, but I also think that it's okay to not have to feel like you need to offset it, by saying he doesn't take health insurance. I think he's worth the stipend.
Right, he is. But he's not much of, I guess the reason why I say he's not taking as much from the town that he could be. I mean, because he could easily just come in and say, fine, I'll take health insurance, and now we're into it for much more than that. So the next one, we go down to the 30/72/10, the telephone and internet. So he has computer aided dispatch, so that's the increase in the Wi-Fi to run those.
Why is that an increase? Is it you need more bandwidth, or?
Just the Wi-Fi for those tablets that we bought for each truck, so there's roughly 4 going now. Each one of those needs Wi-Fi from our Verizon account.
Oh, so you mean cellular connection?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
'Cause I was
just to receive the notes from dispatch.
Okay, so when those are active, they're not using the station's Wi-Fi, they're using their own cellular.
Correct, when they leave the barn.
So it's their own, okay, that's what I just wanted to clarify, so. It's essentially adding devices, so.
Yes, yep. And I did, just, every truck, every pumper truck had a cell phone for this thing, so we actually really got rid of the cell phones. We're not using it, or with the FOIA and everything else, if you take pictures of accidents, all those could be garnered in a legal suit. So we really got rid of the cell phones in the pumper truck. We use mine, or you can use these tablets, as photo evidence, really. So it really does still protect the town.
It's nice that it keeps it in a place that's easy for staff to find in the event that there is a.
Yes, yep, and each one's assigned a truck, almost like an IP address.
Yeah.
All right, line 30/72/30 ambulance services, because call volume goes up he uses more material that's in his ambulance, and he has to restock that. And just the inflation in stocking, the cost to
Yep, medical
restock that is
supplies
going
are
up.
cheap.
Yep.
Yeah, and certain things happen, like the hurricane that came through like North Carolina, that's where the Baxter, production for IV fluid is, right? So that doubles, and it's just, there's nothing you can do. And you
Right.
can't plan for it, you can't think of these things, it doubles. But I do point out, revenues that Heather's a fan of.
Hey, we're all a fan of
Well,
revenue,
you're
so.
right. The ambulance revenues were up to like 117,000. Again, just a reminder, it doesn't come back to the fire department, that goes right back into general, for you to use. So, it's just a reinvestment in the business, if you will, but that's your determination.
Do you recall what % increase that is from previous years?
It was on there,
I couldn't remember if we already skimmed it.
no, I'll tell you.
Well, we
right
might have
now.
skimmed it, but I wanna highlight increased revenues
Yeah.
whenever we have the chance, so.
So, I don't have the page, but under ambulance revenues, because we went up in volume,
It's on page 7.
7, you know, we went from 92,000 to 117, so, you know, almost 25, and we're projected to go up from there also, because of increased call volume.
So that's a 27% increase.
Awesome.
Does that include remember how we did the thing about the billing?
Yes,
Is that in that?
yes it
line?
is,
Okay.
that is why
But
it's
we
up.
initiated that in the previous, partway through the previous budget, right?
Yes, yep.
And so
But-
this is the
but it's
first
taking-
full year with that being in play?
Yes, and don't forget, they're still collecting from 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So it's just an ongoing, our billing company, ongoing.
Okay. So fire department's up 13.4% as a result of the way the numbers fall.
I think Chief got a grant too, right, for radios? Is that-
So we didn't receive it yet, but, and you'll receive this, my end of year update to you all next week with all the call volumes, mutual aid, down to the, how many times we went to Freeport, how many times they came here. But yes, so we just applied to FEMA for 180,000 for radios, whether we get it or not. We did Gary Sinise for, and you'll get the whole report, for a Lucas machine, for a CPR machine, it's about 23,000. Just the other day, they submitted for a new boat from Firehouse Subs, that's over 30,000.
Like the sandwich place where
Yeah.
you buy a
Yep.
So round-up is what you're saying. I love those sandwiches. I eat all
There's
day long.
also the main EMS funding for keeping of employees. And again, all that, some of those revenues go back to general. But the main EMS sustainability fund, we're looking at possibly 15,000 coming back to the town. And we also applied, and again, as I've told you, it's a cycle, right? Just every time. We put in a bill for the 2023 shooting in Lewiston. So there's a grant funding for overtime cost. So again, myself, 4 members went, 10 covered the town, so that was submitted also. So that's over $1,000.
And
You'll
you
get the
re-
breakdown.
You receive some safety equipment through
Yes,
Poland Spring
every
as
year
a-
we go
as
through the state MMA, all of the safety equipment, and we do the volunteer forest fire,
yeah.
funny enough, so that's a matching. So we receive roughly 5,000 to 10,000 a year in equipment. And some of that's matching, which I've worked with the town manager to
But-
increase.
From the shooting response, you received some safety equipment as
Yep,
well, yeah, which would have a pretty price tag.
Bulletproof vests, if you
Yeah.
will, ballistic vests, I think that was upwards of 12,000 from the shooting. Yep.
Yeah, I just think it'd be great if we have a tally of all the grants that were pulled in by everybody, so we can show where we're getting some other stuff. It just, if you all think that's a good idea, so.
Okay.
Awesome.
One more thing on your plate, Jerry.
Alright. Just keep adding it up.
We're switching Jerry's
You are
plate
your
out
own
for,
public relations.
we're switching Jerry's plate out for a platter. I
Right.
prefer platters for dinner, so.
And you will get that in the fire department end of the year, next week, for you all, before your next meeting.
That's really good stuff.
Thanks, Chief.
Any other questions for the fire department before we move on?
Yeah, this cost to repair equipment and maintenance, is that just because there's some scheduled maintenance items that are coming up that are gonna drive that? I think
Yes.
about like with my vehicle, I know this is not a year I need to change the transmission fluid, but that's a big expense when it comes along, right, you know?
I just did the average cost of the 6 vehicles that are out in the bay, not the utility. They're averaging 16.5 years old,
Mm-hmm.
between the 6. Luckily, the ladder truck is out getting rehabbed right now, so that's positive with the ARPA funds that was appropriated. But the other things, yes, one of the trucks just turned 21 years, so the spring's in the back, but that's an $8,000, preparation for. And then again,
Yeah.
you're talking 18 months out, so those trucks will be 18 years old.
So this is estimating some specific expenses that you
Yes, that's getting with-
anticipate, not just a general
Correct,
estimate of
and
baseline.
getting with our mechanic, what he wants to fix, like
Yep.
the fuel tank on the tanker this year was done,
Mhm.
tires come up, that type of stuff, and, those are large trucks, they add up
Those
quick.
tires aren't cheap either.
Yeah.
So there's no built-in planning for, the potential of when you have to buy a new vehicle? Like you
That's
put
That's
some-
capital reserves,
That's it,
yeah.
okay.
Yes, capital, but for us, the next plan would be an ambulance in '29. Now, next year, you'll see that we'll start talking about signing a contract, ambulances are 3 years out. But we've decided throughout the years, talking with Jerry, consulting with mechanics, that we're just gonna keep what we have for the fire department.
Remember how we were gonna refurb with the ARPA funds?
Yep,
Did that happen?
that is being rehabbed right now, the ladder truck is out of quarters, it's in Auburn, and it's being rehabbed with the ARPA funds, yep. Which will add 10 years to that truck.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So animal control, this just got updated today, as a matter of fact, I just got the estimate from Chief McGee over in Lisbon, what it was gonna be, and I got the number from Coastal Humane, and it's 29, it's 3.7% increase.
I feel confused about this part because we budgeted what I assume we're budgeting, the way we're budgeting for 26, we did, because I thought that was like a fixed cost for us to be able to have the animal control officer. It was 18,650, but then we only spent 12. I thought it was like kind of like Donna, like we just pay a fixed amount of money.
No, he does it based on call volume.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Well,
he kind of just does his call volume and sees what we got for 24, and he makes that as 25.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, why is it going up to 29?
Because that's 18
Oh,
months.
just the 18-month.
Plus the
Please,
3.7%.
Yeah.
We need to leash our dogs, so we don't have to call them.
Okay,
I'm honestly surprised it's not more than that based on
Yeah,
how
I
many
think
dogs
he's
we
probably not
lose.
responding to, people aren't calling for a lot of the dogs that are missing. I think Facebook does a lot of that for
We had
us.
2 dogs dropped off here last week that
Yep.
were running in the road, somebody corralled them up, had to go to work, stopped here. So I contacted animal control, he took them, we had an injured owl. I know you guys don't, these are just daily occurrences.
I had a rabid fox.
He had a rabid fox. It really daily occurrences.
Carrie took care of the rabbit fox,
Yes.
but / animal control officer, town manager.
Not being funny, but when you don't have police or sheriff in a timely fashion, the fire department's always open. So we get a lot of calls that we just handle, really.
all right, we'll move on to Public Works. So on the summary page, just want to point this out. It shows that Public Works is up 2.9%, but that's just the category. If you really look at Public Works budget, he's actually down 3.6, so that's really good.
Good job, Calvin.
Right, making us all look bad.
Yeah,
Right.
overachieve, get gold star for Calvin.
Yeah, right? He did a great job. So we can go
Pizza
down
party
through
for
this.
Public
I'll just pick out, what's increased, in his budget, even though it's decreased. So he's up a little bit in his training and development because he just wants to provide more training opportunities to his crew. Okay? Other contracted services, so last year he hired out a contractor to grade the gravel roads. And people loved it. They really thought they did a good job, so he's gonna try to do that again. We may wanna have a conversation about that, because we're probably one of the towns in the area where a public works department doesn't have a grader. Most public works, and they have a grader. It's a tool they use. And if you look at, the cost of doing that, Kelvin, what was the price to do that?
To do it
grade.
this coming year, what we're looking at, well, it was $8,000 a pop. We did it twice, so you're looking at, for this coming year, you'd have 3 of those at $24,000.
To grade gravel roads, so we might wanna
Is
talk
that-
about that. sometime.
When you say a pop, is that per road?
That's to do all the 6 miles of gravel roads each time they do it, it's $8,000.
And they do it 3 times a
They do
year?
it spring and fall, May and October, and so in this 18-month cycle, you'd have 2 in 25 and 1 in 26.
And not that I'm suggesting adding a grader, but quick question on that. Would there be use for that in the town for outside of just the gravel roads?
Oh, yeah, ditching,
Yeah.
your shoulders get high on the edges, and then water gets stuck, you can't get in the ditch, so then it travels under your pavement and gets,
And do you have staff currently that are capable of operating that
oh, yeah.
with experience?
Yeah.
Okay.
And-
Just, again, not adding that now, just
Right.
asking some
Right.
questions.
And if he doesn't get those gravel roads graded, he gets an earful,
Oh, yeah.
so,
What? Time and play getting an earful?
maybe just something we can talk about. So one good thing here with this budget again, his paving work, is only doing it one time in this budget, so that's why you're seeing a 33% decrease, which helps decrease his whole budget for this.
Quick question, when you say paving work,
Yeah, it's
be a 33% decrease?
40, 72, 57, so
But I thought we said that there was gonna be 2 roads paved in this
Well-
budget section.
1 in 25, not 1 in 25, 1 in 26, but not until after
Okay, sorry, that was
July.
my misunderstanding,
Right.
yep.
Right. So when you go down to salt, let's go down because pretty much everything else is negative. 40, 74, 50, he's doing 2 full winter seasons in this budget, so that's why you see a 33% increase in those 2 lines. All right.
So why not 50% if we're doing 2 winters? Like, why wouldn't it, I just wanna make sure we're budgeting enough.
Just because of the math. The math is.
The math did it, and it's,
Right, so
Okay.
basically you're doubling your budget, 147 to 294. But when you normalize it, the 294 is for 18 month, so, as opposed to 12 months, so you do the math, it just comes out 33%, I don't know how to explain it.
that's why we have
me,
you,
the math.
because I don't understand anything
If
you just said. No, I just, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Total dollars, it's twice,
Okay.
but for 18 months as opposed to 12.
Question here, Calvin, so when we have liquid de-icer, is that applied as a liquid, or is that mixed in with something else, or how is that used differently than salt versus sand? I know it doesn't necessarily pertain to the budget, but just for my edification.
So when the salt comes in, we have a big 5,000-gallon tank in the salt shed, and we treat the salt before we push it up, so it's already treated. We used to have the equipment on the trucks, and we saved probably $50,000 a truck by getting rid of that stuff, not ordering it. So, but they were always, we used to have tanks that would treat the salt as it came out.
So now you treat the salt when you load it up with the
Pre-treated.
liquid de-icer?
Yeah,
Okay.
because, every time the trucks went on.
Because I was just asking, I've never seen anyone driving around spraying liquid off the back, or anything
Well, you
good for liquid off the back.
There was little nozzles, and every time the trucks went out, it was
Yeah.
they're plugged all the time because you're putting molasses and beet juice and those other chemicals, magnesium chloride in there, and of course they just plug up the.
Yeah,
So it was a maintenance
increase
nightmare.
efficiency.
It was a lot easier to just spray it and put it in a pile. And,
See, more cost savings there.
sure,
That's what I'm talking about.
we saved quite a bit on the trucks that way.
I just wanna say that the last 2 times that the roads were awful, I had to be out on the roads, and I can tell a marked difference when I cross our, boundary line. The roads have been really great this year, Calvin.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, if we flip over to the next page, the
Sorry,
biggest-
one thing, the culverts is down 33%, is that because it's only 1 year of
Right.
culvert improvement?
Yeah.
Okay.
What did you say? Oh, culvert. I thought you said
Yeah.
cobra. I was like,
The Cobra?
I thought you
You
said
got a Cobra
cobra.
pit over at the Public Works?
The next biggest percentage increase, even though it's not a whole lot of money, is added allowance. So Calvin's employees get like a clothing allowance. He wants to add it to his part-time employees, and Calvin wants to be included too, so.
I'd like to be included.
Hey, steel-toe boots ain't cheap.
A sweatshirt.
So, and then the other one that's up is the gas and diesel. I mean, they're running that more in the winter time, so we just budgeted more for that, so the result of that is a minus 3.6 in his budget. So,
Job, Calvin.
If you figure
Nice job,
inflation, in it, that's actually a 6%.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
7% reduction.
Hear that, chief?
Yeah, what the heck?
Well, I've been hearing it for months, man. I've been hearing it.
that's how you do your wins, right? Calvin? All right.
I have a question that's in general across all of the budgets, and I might just be recalling this incorrectly. I thought, I know there's an answer and I just can't remember what it is, so I'm asking the question again. I thought we took building maintenance out of the individual budgets and made a building and maintenance category. But I see it in the individual budgets and I can't remember. I feel like I'm recalling that wrong because it's in the individual budgets.
Right, so like the town office has its own little maintenance thing. And then
We did
so
one for the
does-
reserve.
So does Calvin, so does Chief. This is for more, the buildings and grounds is more like for the Eureka, the Riverfront Park, and what used to be the Union Church. It was those buildings under.
Maybe I'm recalling it in the opposite direction. Did it used to have its own category and then you broke it up and put it into the individual budgets? Okay, never mind, move on.
No.
Okay.
So, but what we did do this year, though, was municipal buildings and grounds was in the general government. But where he's kind of the director, if you will, of municipal buildings and grounds, we moved it to over to him. It's just a category within his public works budget. And in most towns, the public works director oftentimes is the buildings and grounds superintendent, or whatever you want to call him too, or the director of buildings and grounds for that matter. So the real only increase here, really that's worth talking about, is we lost our part-time cleaner, was getting paid like minimal $14 an hour, and to hire a new one, we got 2 people, well, we got 1 person in the service. The service was just crazy money. And the individual that we hired gets paid a little bit more than minimum wage, and that's an 18th month budget.
Does this take into account the extra cost for the cemetery that is proposed?
Yeah.
It does, okay.
Somewhat.
I'm confused about where we are.
Oh, right on the
Municipal
municipal grounds, right under Public Works.
Municipal
Page 14.
buildings?
You gotta flip the
Okay,
next page, I think.
15, right? Municipal
Mine
buildings?
Yes.
mine not numbered, so
Yes,
Okay, sorry.
it looks like you got it.
so the 31.4% increase is what,
Okay,
Jack was
okay.
talking
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Were there any other expenses related to that cemetery?
You mean, proposed?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's gonna be stone repairs, and the gate's gonna need some repairs.
And that's something that we'll have to wait till 2026
What line
budget?
is this?
No, this is, one of the things we had asked, I thought, was for the expense on the cemetery.
That they're asking us to assume responsibility for.
So, we're just gonna absorb the labor and the current crew that we have. And there's some money some of this buildings and grounds money would go to fixing some of the stones. I'm sure there's gonna be some adjusting to do to get it, if it's anything like the other cemeteries we've seen, the stone's gonna be dug out of the ground and fixed. There's quite a few broken ones I see over there.
Yeah.
That's with that 15,000, that's that number that's reflecting?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think if it's something we're going to do, we should do it right. And
Yeah.
so, and I don't wanna add to the, to the budget, but
Right.
I think as a town, with the state it's in, it's, they're not doing it, they wanna get rid of it. We have that responsibility. And, that's, not necessarily for this year, but I think in the future, that's something that I would be interested in seeing is what's it going to be for us to take care of it.
Right. And we,
In an appropriate way.
and we did talk about that, but it's hard right now to like throw it, I didn't wanna throw a dart at it, so when we talked, it was like, you're gonna have to mow it, take care of it, and let's just sort of evaluate how that goes. And then we might be better prepared to put a budget number to it. That's more
Or gives
Don't we
reflective
have a
of what's
decision
going
to
on.
make though, and we were waiting for that information to be, because we
We
have
have
not
to vote on it.
finalized that.
Yeah.
We have to
do.
vote it at the
Yeah,
town
we gotta-
meeting.
We gotta bring it to a,
Yeah, the town has to vote on it.
Town has to vote to transfer it to us, correct? And then we will take on the management cost. But
Yeah.
we probably kinda have to get it before we can evaluate the total cost to do repairs and
yeah.
whatnot. So this seems like this 15,000 covers the maintenance of it. And then from there, maybe next budget, you're telling us, there's this significant stonework, there's this whatever that we need to budget for.
Yeah. We have to just look at our cemeteries. If we're taking them on, we just gotta look at them and just
Rather than just
evaluate
throwing a
them.
number out
Yeah,
there.
I'm still not real comfortable with that, so.
Yeah.
Nothing,
Um,
she answered my own question.
I have a question real quick. This part-time staff wages for municipal building cleaning, the only building that they're cleaning right now is the town office?
Town office, Public Works, and Eureka.
So they're not cleaning here?
No, cheap.
That's, so one thing, real quick that came out of last night's meeting was that people pointed out that this space is getting used a ton now for meetings.
Mhm.
And so maybe this isn't the exact time to talk about this, but I would like to see that number increase to get cleaning services in here. Or maybe at least in this space here, because I look at like, we got salt all over this here and all that sort of stuff, and there's, a half dozen meetings a month in here now that weren't here until we moved over here, and if we're gonna be here for a little while, we were paying someone to clean our conference room over there, we're not paying to get this cleaned here. And that just falls on whoever's kicking around, so.
I appreciate the sentiments, but
Yeah.
fire stations, the personnel clean their own.
If that, I just wanna
I'll
throw it out
wrestle
there if you
about
don't
having
think.
some pride and ownership. We'll clean
Yeah.
our own fire station, our own trucks,
Yeah.
and the boys, it's on the list. So
Yeah.
now that we've gone to 24 hours, we can handle that.
Okay, I just
Thank
wanna
you.
make sure that
Thank you
we're
for the
addressing,
sentiment. We will-
something we heard last night, so.
And
yeah.
it is true, but I guess the chief will want more.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're just saying since Calvin came in with a
He
decrease,
did,
you
yeah. All I got is
trying to get a little bit
That's
of,
all I got.
yeah. All right, well, never
Okay.
mind.
Are we all good with municipal buildings?
Yep.
All right. This next one just got
Sorry,
updated.
real quick, we're gonna need to extend
Oh, yeah, okay.
because it's 9:28, so I make a motion that we extend till 9:45. Was that second?
Oh, sorry.
Any discussion?
Do the attendees get to vote? No.
All in favor? Any opposition? Thank you.
All right, so this just got updated today. This is very different than what you got on Thursday. So solid waste is up 22.7%. And those are the numbers.
Is that based off tonnage?
Yep.
Wow.
So is it an increase in the cost of the ton or an increase in the actual tons?
I would
or
say it's the
both?
volume. 'Cause
Yeah.
Right, it's the
You guys
volume of
budgeted
trash.
375 and you actually came in for this year You budgeted 375 at those rates, and I remember last year when you were calculating, you were based off of, okay, these are the contracted rates plus times the tonnage, but you guys still came in 429.
Yeah,
So that has to be tonnage, because they
Yeah.
didn't change the rate.
We
They
gotta
changed the
do
rate.
the get the wet trash out of our garbage.
This was,
Foods,
I
yeah.
think last year, this was one that went up and down. I think it originally was like 385, but then it
Yeah.
went back, then they went down with it, and now
I
it's,
think I-
now
yeah, I
it's
think I-
up, and,
I think I wanted to
and this is
increase
a
it.
tough one to kinda hone in on and find, because it's all based on volume of trash, you know?
Yeah,
So
I think.
I think it reflects the criticality of that solid waste committee,
I do
and
too.
that is not really going well.
Yeah,
I will say, though, that clothesbin, Chief had
Yes.
reported that thing is getting filled up regularly, so that's good.
You mean you see people stop there all the time?
Not only
or
see, but
just-
when they empty it,
Uh-huh, it's,
you can see the bags, they open it right up. I don't know about the weight, but those bags are heavy.
yeah.
So, in this full, you have to imagine 15 to 20 bags a whack.
Yeah.
And they've been doing a great job. Cleaning it, there's no problems, it's been a great program.
Good,
Yeah.
let's talk about that too.
Yeah.
PR that right up.
this
I don't
raises
necessarily think, though, that impacted
Yes.
the tonnage of waste. People were just
Yeah.
taking it to Goodwill instead, but
I
Great
think
program,
that
though.
we'll need to, this is a number we might wanna look at increasing, cause I remember last year, we voted to increase it, the budget committee voted to decrease it, and it looks like it was increased, so it was under budgeted.
Yeah.
But does this 690 reflect the fact that we were over, and so you're,
Did you extrapolate it at the overage?
We took the 430 of actuals, and because there's a contracted 5% increase, we essentially are just increasing what we had for volume times their rates, 5%. If your
Oh.
volume still goes up, again, next year, this will still be,
This
the
is
690
contracted
will
at-
still be under budget.
This contract at the same volume, just at 5% more per ton.
Each
Do
year.
we have an easy deliverable from them from previous years where we can just see the annual tonnage over the
Yeah,
last 5
yeah.
years? And then we can just, well, I mean, just to even have a better educated guess, if we can figure out the factor that it's been increasing and build that into the tonnage. I know it's not perfect, but we had this conversation last year.
We
and we said,
did.
well, we can't guess it. And then we went with way underestimate. So I'm just saying, maybe we should have this conversation again and try to come up with a closer number, because it seems like trash is not, the rate is not going down. And if we see a rate of tonnage increase every single year, and we just estimate based off of the previous year, it just doesn't make sense. Like, we're not budgeting for the same call volume, because we know that call volume's going up all the time. And so I just think that this is a place where we can get a little bit, at least, more educated estimate than what we have here.
Yeah, we have those numbers and tonnages, and it's, if you look at it, it was pretty consistent, and then COVID hit. And people stayed home, I don't know, they were generating more trash or something, so then it went up, and then
Well,
then
there's,
when it went
Well,
back,
they
then
were
it went back
cleaning their
down, and
garage
now
and-
it's up. It's,
well, could you just send me those numbers and
yeah,
I'll
so
just come up with a
I'll have to,
knack and map
get a hold
here.
of Casella to have them update the tonnage for December, so you have the whole year, and then it gives you the report.
I'll just let everyone know, I'm gonna be a stickler on this line this year, cause I was trying to be a stickler last year and everyone said I was crazy.
so I don't wanna just pass over Debbie's comment though. I think
No,
it
no,
is
that's a
really
different-
important that we add to the task list or something, that we circle back to the fact that the solid waste committee,
We can put that on next week's agenda.
Okay, because we're, what,
that work for
a
you?
year into the 5-year
Yeah.
plan of, you know what I mean?
I mean, I think it got a slow start, and then
Let's
it's
just,
not
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah,
let's just put that onto the agenda for next meeting.
okay, that works.
You put that on our.
It just,
What do you, what's,
Just, we'll talk about solid
Oh.
waste, and we'll let them know.
Just one other thing, I have a placeholder in here. It's a composting program. There's no money tied to it. I didn't put any money. You saw that grant that came through.
Yep,
the thing.
I sent it to them,
So
yeah.
that helps get waste out. If you wanna get into a program like that, it's $6,500. But just, let me tell you, it's not a cost-saving measure. It's more of an environmental thing, so.
It's a shifting of
It's a
cost.
shifting, right, so you're not really saving anything, it's just that it's something the solid waste committee can
This
talk
is
about. Calvin and I just did some quick homework to see what would it cost. $6,500. So just keep that.
Composting is cheaper if people are composting on their own.
Exactly. But I just threw that in there to maybe help the cost, but it's not part of the budget.
Yeah.
It's just a little note. In bulky waste, you can see where we had a budget of 12,000, but it was actually 15, and we just called it 32. There's gonna be 2 of those, because they're done in May. So that's up.
Well, anytime we don't do bulky waste, our tonnage is up and our stuff getting thrown on the side of the road is up.
Okay, so, when you take the public works category and you add, solid waste to it, and, it makes it up 2.9% for total public works. Where public works is actually down. All right. Community services. So general assistance, because the maximums went up, we went from 600 to 1,000. You can change that, it's $4,000, $400 difference. Not a lot of money. Outside organizations, those are those donations that the town does. I didn't put anything in there, it's not really something that I can do on my own, so that's and we can, if you look at this sheet here, that you got, you can see what you did last year for outside donations.
Did anybody come to you asking?
No. Well, Mike Clark did for baseball, and snowmobile. But you got a recreation reserve, and I would recommend you pull it out of that rate versus putting it in your budget and raising
And
more
Freeport
taxes.
didn't come asking
I
for a
didn't see
scholarship
anything
this
from
year.
Freeport.
And I believe they came around this time, they came in December or January
Right.
last year. But if I recall, they were trying to build up an endowment and then they were planning to just draw off of that. So maybe they built it up, but if they didn't come asking.
So that's why you're seeing it's down, is because there's no outside organization in there. So, something to think about. Moving on. Debt service, I mean, that is what it is. County tax, that's pretty much what it is. Their tax did go up 10%, but we're only paying it once in this budget, an 18-month budget, that's the percentage increase. Education is a complete estimate, it's just based on what they did last year. I know last year when we did this, we did 3% and we were way off. So I just kept the percentage the same for the school.
So I see that looks like 1.5 times on that 2026 budget. Based
Yeah,
on
because we
24.
paid every month.
Okay, I
Yeah.
just wanted to check.
Yeah,
on
it's
that.
not once a year thing. It's a
Okay, so
monthly
it's
thing.
monthly cash flow.
And the tax payment, we don't really put anything in there at this point. You'll determine that when Donna does the commitment. And the transfers out, that is also on this sheet right here, that is basically your capital reserves. And what I did here for you is, there was really no significant increase to replace the equipment, so we left the amounts the same as we did last year. We just did it 1.5 times. That's the 307, the 270, and the 15. The 6,000, if you do 6,000, it'll keep our grant up to $30,000. So if we get matching grants, we'll have money to pull it from. And that all totals up to that 598,500, which is line 99, 8,500. Transfers out. And that's what makes up that number.
Can I ask a question about the, 3 departments and you just did 1.5 times?
Yeah.
Do you think that when we do that, we should at least do the cost of living each year with those numbers?
For the transfers up,
For like how Public Works, we did 205, Fire Department 180, Town Buildings 10. Should we multiply those by the cost of living and then do it?
No,
Okay.
because the long-term plan for the capital improvements is, well, we're planning out different purchases over the course of 10, 20 years, and then taking all of that and saying, okay, how much do we need on an annual basis in order to make sure that we'll have enough money and never go negative in order to make those purchases.
Because if you recall, that was the exercise they went through and figured out those 10-year costs, or those 10-year costs, and they built in, the department heads were building in expected
Correct.
inflation during that time frame. So this annual contribution is to achieve a set figure that already has.
I didn't know the
Inflation.
inflation was built in, okay.
Yeah, so when they say, oh, we're gonna buy a truck 20 years from now, it's not today's prices, they, you know,
Right.
they do a rough estimate
Okay.
of what it might be 20 years from now.
Thank you for explaining.
Yeah.
Okay.
In that, we can go to the very last page, just want to point some things out here to you.
So real quick, it just
Yep.
says the total townwide here.
What
It says
page?
on the ARPA, it says negative 3.2%
Yeah.
annualized. Is that, I must have just zoned out.
And that's because you're only doing one debt service, you're only doing one county tax. And your transfers out doesn't include, last year we had a, what, 160,000 for assessing that we're not doing, so. Those are the reasons why it's down.
Yeah. Okay. Even with some other things being up.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. I like negative numbers, I just like knowing.
Yeah, there's a few of them in this one. So the very last page, this is just a basic, this is your fund balances. 01, the general fund. You can see where we started the last year at 3.6 million, but then we ended the year at 3.2. So of that 668 that we used, we really didn't use
Right,
all
we
of
only
that.
used about 400,000.
We budgeted 668,000 of general funds, but expenditure out of the fund balance, but we only used 400 and change.
Right.
Yeah.
We have one more AP to go through, so there's gonna be probably another 40,000, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But other than that, so you used about 420 roughly, or will end up using about 420.
So we still have a pretty good, healthy fund balance.
And the reasons for that, Heather, because I know you're wondering why is that, is because you came in under budget for a lot of your expenditures for the year, and you also came in over estimates for revenue. And so the variance between those two resulted in the variance in the use of fund balance.
And I should just retrain my brain that we're not trying to make that equal.
That's correct.
Okay.
We're trying to spend down the
Right.
fund
Well,
balance.
I mean, you want to be close to what you're budgeting for your use of fund balance, but you're never going to get there because no town goes over budget on their expenditures, right? You're not allowed to, so
Right.
you're always coming in under budget for expenditures no matter what.
And inherently, we know we're gonna pick up a little valuation every year, and then if we are continuing to adjust our fee schedule, and depending on the number of applications, the revenues could increase.
Right.
So it's like if you're planning to spend out of your savings account, you spend less out of your savings account, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Correct.
And the
So-
goal though with the fund balance is we are deliberately trying to spend it down because it's not great to hold on to taxpayer dollars and not apply it to a use.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I just also like the fact that we get all the way through the year without having to take a loan and pay interest on that.
yeah.
Right? And with our fund balance where it is, that allows us to do that.
Right, and that's some of the things we want to talk about when we start talking about the warrant and what we're gonna, warrant articles that we need to consider going into this budget.
Yeah.
It's an 18-month budget. And I also, just real briefly, I know we're gonna go, is that we also want to talk about writing a warrant article to clean up some of these reserve
Reserve
accounts.
funds, yeah, it's
And just kind of
possible.
organize that a little bit better.
Yeah.
But other than that, that's pretty much the budget that I'm confident with, and I just thank Calvin and Chief Tripp and Mark
Really happy
for
with
working
Calvin's.
with me and helping me with this, and
Chief mentioned that.
just a lot of work went into this.
So we're leaving it like this. We're gonna have
I
a
was gonna
discussion and then we'll go through and vote. We're not
I
doing
was gonna
that
say,
tonight.
because of time, I'd like us to just absorb this information and come with recommendations for next week for Jared. The only challenge there is we're gonna need to have those airtight because he needs to just adopt them, and we're not gonna have a chance to look at them in a public setting again before the budget goes to the budget committee, because that's supposed to be to them 1st of February.
Right.
And by next week, you mean
Sorry, next
28th.
meeting, the 28th. And so, if I was concerned that I thought we were gonna have major changes, I'd be the pain in the butt who extends this further, but I think
Yeah.
we're pretty good. Especially when
And
we
we
get
also have,
Calvin coming
Thank
so
you for
low. you
coming.
know?
we also have Joe's, comments from his email. too.
Yeah, and so we wanna go over that, but I don't think we'll need Mark for next month meeting, because I think we're just gonna talk to you a little bit about adjustments, so.
I do think and I would like to have him come to the first budget committee.
Absolutely,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's on the 27th?
I'll have to.
No,
I'll
that's
have
gonna
to
be-
keep you- I'll have to keep you posted, because I'm
Their
not.
first meeting on the 27th is just a
I'm not
process
wrong.
meeting.
Oh, okay.
And then it's the
Am I-
first meeting in
What
February.
happened?
So, but don't forget, we got the consent agenda to do, that sort of thing.
Yep. So,
Wrap this up.
let's see here.
I know.
So, in terms of our budget here, I mean, our agenda here, I'm gonna, you don't have anything else for manager's report?
I don't, I will say that the generator at the town office is scheduled to be replaced on the 24th of January.
Ooh,
Okay.
I hope it's good weather.
Hopefully we have power, yeah.
So, that's.
Is everyone okay if we just skip over board member reports for the sake of time tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I just need a motion to approve the meeting minutes and the consent agenda.
So, second.
All right, any questions? All in favor? Any opposition? Seeing none. Upcoming meetings are planning board January 15th and then budget committee January 27th, which is just a policy meeting. They're not looking at the budget yet. And then our select board meeting January 28th, where we'll finalize our budget. We go.
The facilities meeting.
Oh, and the facilities meeting. The public hearing for the.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't need an executive session tonight, so I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, any conversation? All in favor, any opposition? Seeing none. Done. Let's see the signatures here.
Yes, really good.
Are we off?